Chapter 293. 274 times and heroes. The former high priest of the Temple of Isis cleared his throat and said, "My lords, the gods can naturally make oracles in the souls of all believers. Do you think that the gods can't do it? But if that's the case, what's the use of shrines and priests? The priests represent the people to offer sacrifices to the gods, guide the people to pray to the gods, and also convey oracles to the people on behalf of the gods, so that the people accept the guidance of the gods. This is an honor and a duty, but also the fundamental meaning of existence. If this meaning is violated, the foundation of the shrines will be shaken, and the priests will lose their seemingly sacred halo." Ammonius' vow was that he did not want to become a god like Enlil or Seth that he saw on earth. If the world keeps the shrines, then keep them, symbolizing the glory that people are looking for. The priests are also just priests in the shrines, and whether the shrines they control lose this symbolic meaning is also up to the priest's choice. Everyone who accepts the guidance of the gods with firm faith will feel the divine brilliance in their hearts, and it does not matter whether they have the identity of a priest or not. The god I am talking about is my one and only god, Ammon. Iban's forehead was slightly sweating, and a general at the table slammed the table and shouted, "Chief priest, are you still not going to announce the oracle?" Iban turned to look at Roddick and said, "My lord, this should be up to you to decide." Everyone also looked at the lord of the city. Under the gaze of so many people, Roddick stood up and said in a clear voice, "The evil god Seth murdered Osiris and stole the position of Igut but failed. 1,000 years later, he took advantage of the Uruk legion's pressure to force Horus to retreat and deceive the people of Igut to offer sacrifices. Now he has been beheaded by Ammonius. Back then, the supreme general Ammon of the empire walked the earth and achieved the achievements of the gods, and was already the king of the Ennead. From today onwards, my glory and title belong to Ammon, and Ra is the name of Ammon." After reading these words, he looked around at the crowd and said, "This is the content of Ra's oracle, and I do not want to explain anything more. I am sure that after you have heard it, you will understand why Pharaoh did not allow it to be made public." Then he bowed to Medanzo and said, "May I ask what is the second question of Ammonius?" No one spoke for a long time. They were all reflecting on the meaning of the oracle. Even the generals who were almost drunk seemed to have sobered up. Medanzo said unhurriedly, "Lord Roddick, the commander of the Inare Legion, the governor of Cape City, you are the pride of the Cape States. You inherited the position of the governor from your father at a young age, and you are praised and respected by the people. In the eyes of the world, your life is a perfect dream. Ammonius just wants to ask you, do you sigh in the middle of the night when you think about it? Do you feel emotional and regretful when you face your heart? Do you feel that your life is not in vain when you are full of ambition and passion? But do you also think that you can only sigh in silence, and that you will sigh until the end of your life? Is that right?" Roddick was stunned. His birth, status, and achievements could be described as the perfect dream in the minds of many people. What regrets could there be in life? But the question that Ammon asked Medanzo to ask in front of everyone hit Roddick's secret. The pride of Cape may have the same regrets about life as the common people. He would also sigh in the long night, yearning to be a legendary hero and aspire to live a heroic life. The difference was that most people in this world only dreamed about it, and did not have the conditions to realize it. But it was not impossible for Roddick to do it. But Roddick had all kinds of concerns, and these concerns were not unreasonable. He was a very competent city lord, and people thought so too. However, in his own mind, was everything really so? The banquet was no longer noisy, and everyone was silent, thinking about their own thoughts. Roddick suddenly turned to the attendants and said, "Bring me my sword." What was the governor going to do with his sword at the banquet? Everyone was very puzzled. They stared at him, waiting to see what he was going to do. The attendants brought Roddick's sword. The scabbard was wrapped in gold ornaments, and the hilt was inlaid with a blue aquatic ore. Roddick drew the sword and swung it forward. The silver sword was inserted into the table in front of him, all the way to the hilt. Even the generals of the Inare Legion had to praise. Good swordsmanship, good strength. The silver light on the sword flashed, and the amazing power it contained was beyond the limits of ordinary people. It was difficult to see that the usually gentle and elegant Governor Roddick was only one step away from becoming a supreme warrior. Roddick inserted the sword into the table, and his whole body exuded a kind of unprecedented heroic spirit. He looked around at the crowd and said, "Pass my order. Tomorrow the temple bell will be rung, and I will read the oracle in public in the square." Yibin hurriedly said, "Governor, you don't have to take this responsibility. I am the chief priest, and tomorrow I will announce the oracle to the people as the chief priest of the Cape States." Roddick, who was full of heroic spirit just now, suddenly smiled bitterly and said, "I am the governor and the head of the legion. Everyone knows my position in the Cape States. Since I have decided to do this, why bother to hide it? Thank you, Ammonius, for asking. This is what I want and what I will do today." George stood up with a cup in his hand and said loudly, "Let's toast to the governor." The generals also stood up and toasted. Even if the other officials had doubts, they could only pick up their cups at this time. Just now, many officials asked Roddick about the content of the oracle, but they just wanted to find out what was going on in private. They did not necessarily want to force him to disobey Pharaoh's order. But Roddick made this decision on his own, which was beyond the expectations of many people. This was really not like the governor on normal days, especially when he drew his sword and slashed. People couldn't help but feel shocked and amazed. Madanzo quietly said to George in his soul, "Ammonius is really amazing. How did he know that by sending the two of us, Roddick, who has always been watertight, would make such an amazing decision?" George smiled and quietly replied, "I have also been in the officialdom for many years. I know the mind of people like Roddick. If his heart does not want anything, his will is not strong. With such a noble background and no high achievements, why would he persist in practicing martial arts for so many years? In his heart, there must be a yearning that he is not willing to give up. That is both his wish and his regret. It is a pity that his background is too good, his situation is too superior, and he is too smart and capable. In the face of all kinds of things, there are always too many choices to avoid conflict. There are always too many leeway for him to take advantage of both sides. He will make all kinds of preparations for what he really wants to do, but he may not do it, because he has ways to avoid trouble. Over time it will become a habit. But in his own heart, there is another Roddick, the Roddick that he really wants to be." Madanzo said with emotion, "Isn't the vast majority of people in this world like this? People often have another version of themselves in their hearts, the person they dream to be. This dream is often unrealistic, and the circumstances of reality will eventually make people's vows vanish into thin air. And Roddick is lucky, at least he has such an opportunity. You said that he will make all kinds of preparations for what he wants to do, so the decision to generously draw his sword just now is actually one of the preparations he has made long ago?" George nodded secretly and said, "Yes, such a scene may have been imagined countless times in his quiet night reverie, and today he finally did it." At this moment, the voice of the supreme mage Ibn drowned out all the noise of the banquet. "My lord, if you do this, Pharaoh will definitely punish you. How will you face it?" Roddick gently pulled his sword out of the hard wooden table, returned it to its sheath and handed it to the attendant, and replied with a sneer, "Punish me? How? Has Pharaoh's order been made public? Does His Majesty dare to announce to the people that he has given such an order?" Just like when Supreme General Amon killed Prince Snek and left Igut, Pharaoh could only send Lord George and Lord Gabriel to secretly pursue him, but did not publicly convict the Supreme General. Ibn reminded again. "Having said that, if Pharaoh wants to punish you, he has other ways, my lord, to be prepared." Roddick smiled again. "I have already made the so-called preparations. Recently, I have been in private communication with the main officials of the various cities and states. Everyone is dissatisfied with Pharaoh's two successive orders, and does not dare to destroy the oracle like this. They are all watching, waiting for someone to take the lead in resisting the order. In particular, Governor Tu Yang of Montefiore and the Huanzhong Legion of Isis have the same idea as me. The day before yesterday, they sent letters to persuade me that if they disobey the order and issue the oracle, they hope to get my support and response." Madanzo glanced at George, revealing a look of admiration. The former high priest of the Temple of Isis had guessed correctly. Roddick had indeed been preparing for this for a long time. Just like many other things he had planned in his life. It was just that at this moment, he had finally made up his mind to act. The chief priest Ibn nodded. So the lord of the city has been preparing for this for a long time. I have been overthinking. But I have to remind you, if His Majesty Pharaoh wants to punish you, according to official practice, he will find an excuse to order you to the capital. As long as you leave the Cape States and go to the palace, he has his own means to get rid of you. And if Pharaoh summons you, you have to go. At this time George spoke again. The other task that Ammonius sent me and Madanzo is to protect the safety of Lord Dick. At noon the next day, when the sun rose to its highest point, Roddick ordered people to ring the bell of the shrine, which was a signal to summon the people to the square to listen to the oracle. The lord of the city was dressed in military attire, and surrounded by priests and guards. He stood on the long steps of the shrine and read the oracle of Ra aloud. The people in the square were stunned at first, and they did not react for a long time. Everyone was there pondering the meaning of the oracle. Suddenly someone shouted, "Almighty Ammon!" Then, the shouts became louder and louder. Roddick walked into the shrine amidst the calls and worship of Ammonius by the people of the city. He whispered to George, "The statue of Seth has collapsed, so naturally there is no need to rebuild it. But according to the meaning of the oracle, Ra is the name of Ammon. Is it necessary to replace the main statue in the shrine with the statue of Ammon?" George's smile was somewhat unfathomable as he pointed to the statue of Ra in the center of the hall and asked, "Of course it is not necessary, my lord. You have been offering sacrifices to this statue for so many years. Have you not noticed the appearance of the god?" Roddick looked up at the majestic statue. It was so tall that it was difficult for ordinary people to see the face of the god standing in the shrine. If it was outside the gate of the shrine, they could only see a majestic outline. What's more, when people offered sacrifices to the gods, they worshipped and saluted, and it was impossible to look at the statue like they were looking at their son-in-law. It was the first time that Roddick had looked at the facial features of the statue of Ra so intently, and he could not help but open his mouth wide in surprise. The craftsman carved a handsome and mighty man, and the outline of his facial features carried an invisible air of fortitude. The more he looked at it, the more he looked like Ammon. Roddick asked himself in his heart, "Why didn't I notice it before? How could the craftsman on earth know what the gods looked like?" This was a very interesting question. As far as the gods Ammon had seen were concerned, their faces were similar to the statues in the shrine, indicating that the craftsman did not carve them at random. This situation was understandable. Some gods had appeared in the human world, and people could build them according to the descriptions passed down by word of mouth, and referring to the historical relics that had existed. On the other hand, the gods also had emissaries on earth, and their first shrines were often built by the people under the guidance of these emissaries. Some craftsmen had even seen the gods with their own eyes, so they could sculpt statues that were similar to the gods. It might be difficult for people who lacked spirituality to understand this feeling. When the craftsmen who believed in the gods carved the statues, they were not just completing a work or a piece of work, but pouring their soul into it. The image of the gods contained their belief in the gods, and their understanding of divinity. This was the most essential difference between the real works of art handed down from ancient times and the pure handicrafts of the world. When the craftsmen sculpted the statues, their souls would also be guided, intentionally or unintentionally. This guidance may come from the gods themselves or the emissaries left by the gods on earth. Or it may be the understanding or imagination of the craftsmen in their souls. Ra was the oldest god of the Ennead, and had almost become a forgotten god before Pharaoh of Merneptah carried out the monotheistic reform. And long before Osiris established the empire of Igut, Ra had never left the divine realm to come to earth, and the emissaries he guided back then had either become gods or were long gone. That is to say, in Igut today, no one knew what Ra looked like, and the craftsmen could only sculpt statues based on their imagination, but they could not sculpt him into the appearance of other gods. But how could this statue carry the shadow of Ammon? Maybe it was just an illusion or a coincidence. Or maybe there was a mystery that was difficult for the world to understand. It was normal that Rod-Dik had not noticed it before, because he had never thought about it at all. Just like when Amon left the mountains and saw Yun-Nam-Na for the first time. He had never thought that the girl was Murin, even though he had been used to seeing the statue of Murin in Duk since he was a child. George also looked at the statue of Ra and muttered to himself. Who created the gods and why are they gods? Madanzo looked at Rod-Dik and whispered. Congratulations, my lord, you have finally broken through to the supreme level. Why did Madanzo say that? At this moment, Rod-Dik, who was looking up at the gods, stood there, as if the power in his bloodline had been integrated into his soul. This was the aura that only a supreme warrior could have. It had been 30 years since Rod-Dik became a 6th-level warrior, and after so many years, he had been unable to break through to the supreme level. There were too many people in the world who were blocked out of this threshold for life. He was not a mage, and at the age of 56, although his physique was still strong, his chances of becoming a supreme warrior were slim. But he did it. This could be considered a small miracle, and it happened overnight. According to the tradition of the cities of Igut, when a warrior was promoted to a 7th-level supreme warrior, the governor of the city had to summon the officials to hold a ceremony to congratulate him. Amon had also received such congratulations in Montefiore. Although Rod-Dik had issued an oracle in violation of Pharaoh's secret order, he still did things in accordance with the rules. He himself was the governor of the city, so he entrusted the chief priest Ibn to summon the officials to hold a ceremony to celebrate his promotion to a supreme warrior. At the same time, Rod-Dik sent an urgent message to the officials of the cities who had dealings with him. In fact, there was no need for him to do so. The news spread immediately, and all kinds of people sent letters everywhere for various purposes. Merneptah and Pharaoh also learned of the matter a few days later. Merneptah flew into a rage and immediately wanted to punish Rod-Dik, but he calmed down under the persuasion of his confidants. He could not punish Rod-Dik like this, and he had to consider the consequences of the incident. So Pharaoh sent messengers to the Cape States, and ordered Rod-Dik to rush to the king's capital to report on his work and meet the king. The first thing to do was to get this man under control. This was also to establish power and let everyone see Rod-Dik's fate. Although the Cape States had already announced the oracle, if the other cities could carry out Pharaoh's secret order, then Pharaoh could make an announcement that Rod-Dik had forged the oracle and issued it without authorization. This was a capital crime. Such an outcome was in the best interest of Merneptah. Chapter 294. The former head of the Legion of Isis was an 8th-level warrior named Ankh, who was born in a military noble family. An Huanzhang was the son of Ankh. Now he was also a supreme warrior. Ankh was almost 70 years old this year. He had been promoted to the minister of the army of Igut. He was currently in the capital. It was not easy for Merneptah to touch Ankh and his son. They had deep roots in the army, and Huanzhang had a large number of troops. Pharaoh planned to first summon Ankh to the palace and put him under house arrest, then force Ankh to write a letter to trick Huanzhang to the capital. Then bad news reached Pharaoh's ears. It was said that the actions of the Cape States and Montefiore were secretly supported by the chief elder of the Igut Academy of Magic, the supreme mage Vord. Then it caused other cities to follow suit. Pharaoh Merneptah felt a deep fear. Representatives of the bureaucracy, the military, and the clerics had all appeared to rebel against him. If he didn't suppress them quickly, then his real doomsday would soon come. The supreme mage Burke, who had a grudge with Amon in the past, had now been promoted to the high priest of the main shrine of Igut. Shocked and angry, Pharaoh sent someone to talk to Burke in secret, and made a lot of promises in private. He hoped that Burke would play a vital role at this critical moment, and do a few things for him. After meeting Pharaoh, Burke returned to the shrine from the palace with a gloomy face. The trusted priest asked him what he had talked about with Pharaoh. Burke was silent for a long time before replying, "His Majesty has gone mad." The confidant had followed Burke for many years, and was absolutely trustworthy. He frowned and said, "Now the situation is very clear. More than a dozen cities have issued the oracle of Allah, but everyone still gave the king face, and did not say that Pharaoh had issued a secret order to destroy the records of the oracle. If His Majesty is wise, he should go along with the flow and acknowledge the oracle, officially promulgate it in the form of a royal decree, and then announce his abdication. There may still be a way out. Burke smiled bitterly. I admit that the oracle can't be stopped, but you want Pharaoh to abdicate? You think this is Pharaoh's only way out, but His Majesty doesn't think so. Even if he really did that, would he have a good ending after abdicating? His Majesty was going to struggle on his deathbed. Even if he could not save his own life and was cursed by the gods, he would drag the traitors down with him. What's more, he's still thinking about how to salvage the situation, plotting with me on how to suppress it. The confidant sucked in a breath of cold air and said, His Majesty has really gone mad. Was he going to deal with the Ankh father and son, Roderick, and even the Supreme Mage Vord? If you're the one planning this, then you'll be the one to die with Pharaoh, not them. Burke sighed. Of course I understand. So it's time to make a decision. The confidant reminded him, not without worry. When you were the high priest of the Temple of Isis, Amon had just arrived at Igut, and the Supreme Mage Julian had sent people to kill him. A secret letter to you later fell into the hands of Maria. You have an old grudge with Amon. What should you do if you don't support Pharaoh at this time? Burke narrowed his eyes. I'm not really feeling sorry for you, Amon. If he couldn't even let go of such a trivial matter, how can he still be called a god? There's one thing you must be clear about. Allah did issue the oracle. I'm a priest, and I can only do what I should do. What's more, Merneptah is already at the end of the road. Whether it's a wise choice or my own duty, I can't support Pharaoh. The confidant asked again. What does my lord need me to do for you? Burke pondered. Go to Montefiore immediately to see Lord Tu Yang and General Huanzhang. At the same time, stop Roderick on the way and tell him my message. Roderick should have already set off for the capital, and General Huanzhang will be here soon. Pharaoh is still in control of the imperial guards in the capital, and there are some things that can't be done openly and rashly. For the time being, I'll follow Pharaoh's instructions and go see Ankh, the Minister of Military Affairs. I'll put him under house arrest and write a letter to Huanzhang. Roderick received an order to rush to the capital city of Thebes to report on his work, and enter the palace to see Pharaoh. Aben's guess was right. Merneptah wanted to trick Roderick into the capital and control him before dealing with him. Some people suggested that Roderick pretend to be sick, while others suggested that he should simply take the Andra Legion with him. Roderick shook his head and said, Since I've decided, I'll face it. Everyone knows that I've just advanced to a supreme warrior. Why should I pretend to be sick? I just issued an oracle. I didn't commit treason. How can I mobilize the garrison without authorization? You don't have to worry about me. I've already contacted many officials in the cities and the capital, and I know what to do. Madanzo asked him, My lord, have you decided to go to the capital? Roderick nodded and said, Yes. I'll set off tomorrow. George smiled and said, Madanzo and I will accompany you. It's not easy to mobilize the Andra Legion, but the lord can't be without a personal escort. Roderick left the Cape States with more than 10 personal attendants, walking along the official road, accepting the hospitality of the officials of the cities along the way. Whether in public or private, they talked about many things, while Madanzo and George also accompanied them all the way. In Montefiore, Roderick met with Lord Daiatu and General Huanzhang, and also received a secret report from Burke. Huanzhang had just received a letter from his father, Ankh, asking him to meet him in the capital, so he and Roderick set off from Montefiore and took a boat along the Nile River. Officials like them passed through the border. Along the way, there were all kinds of official receptions. Now was a special time, and this kind of reception increased. There were many subtle meanings. On the surface, the two lords were calm as usual. It's just that they had to go to the capital for official and private matters. They came along the Nile River, but it caused the undercurrents of the entire Igut to surge. His Majesty the Pharaoh sent the High Priest Burke to lead the Imperial Guards. Welcome. As soon as Roderick and Huanzhang entered the city, they were placed under house arrest. According to Burke, His Majesty kept these two lords in the capital to discuss important matters. Soon after, one of the 3 most important ceremonies of the Igut was about to arrive. According to tradition, The high priest in charge of the ceremony would gather the important officials and elders of the Academy of Magic to discuss the ceremony. He would then report the results to Pharaoh, as there were some important arrangements that required Pharaoh's personal decision. There were a total of 3 high priests in the main shrine of the Igut, and the most important ceremony of the ceremony was also held 3 times. Every time, Pharaoh would lead the officials to host the ceremony, and the 3 high priests would take turns presiding over the ceremony. This time it was Berk's turn. Pharaoh placed the most elite imperial guards under Berk's command, and gave him a list of names. He planned to take them down one by one while the officials and elders of the Academy of Magic were gathered to discuss the ceremony. And the most important one was Vord. Pharaoh received the news that Roderick had issued the oracle without permission, and rushed back to Thebes from the new capital. Nominally, it was for the ceremony, but he had already cast a net in the dark, and was just waiting to reel it in. His reaction was fast, and his methods were ruthless. He had even thought of different ways to deal with the various traitors. The Ankh father and son could not be killed for the time being, and he had to find an excuse to bring them to the new capital, and put them under house arrest. He would promote the generals of other families to become the heads of the Legion of Isis and the Inyaira Legion, and appoint a new military minister of the empire. Vord was old, and announced to the public that the supreme mage had been summoned by the gods, and had already completed his life's journey, and held the most standard memorial ceremony. As for Roderick, he was a troublemaker, and had to be executed with a suitable crime. Today was the day when Berk gathered everyone to discuss the matters of the ceremony. The pharaoh received a lot of secret reports in the palace, and everyone went to the place where Berk was discussing the ceremony. Those who should go had gone, and the necessary arrangements had been made. There was no unusual movement outside. No movement is the best movement. This meant that everything was going smoothly. That night, Pharaoh sent the eunuchs out to wait for something in the palace. He was restless, and Berk should have sent someone to report the results. But there was no update until nightfall, and Pharaoh could not sit still anymore. He was about to send someone to ask, when suddenly he heard the footsteps of a group of people coming from outside the palace. Who was breaking into the palace at night? The eunuchs would never make such a sound, and the guards patrolling the palace would not be here in a line. Merneptah hurriedly called to the left and right, but no one responded. Even the 2 court supreme mages who were responsible for protecting him seemed to have disappeared without a sound. Just then, Pharaoh heard the high priest Berk shouting outside the palace. Chief Elder Vord of the Igut Academy of Magic, together with the high priests and elders of the Academy of Magic, Minister of War Ankh. The 2 commanders, Ling Huanzhang and Drick, have come to His Majesty to discuss important matters with His Majesty. As soon as he heard this, Pharaoh felt his hands and feet go cold, his mind buzzing, and his whole body numb, as if something was leaving him and draining all his strength. How was this an audience? The traitor, who had thought he was already a prisoner, was now being brought to the door of the palace by Berk. There was a bloodless palace coup in Igut, and its mastermind was Berk, one of the 3 high priests of the kingdom. In the middle of the night, Merneptah announced his abdication, and his nephew and son-in-law, the underage Tutenhart, became the new pharaoh. The name Tutenhart was given by Merneptah, which meant the successor to the glory of Seth. The Igut royal family had a tradition of intermarriage since ancient times, and Tutenhart was both Merneptah's nephew and married Merneptah's daughter. After Tutenhart succeeded the throne, he changed his name to Tutankhamun, which meant the guardian of the glory of Amun. The name of the new pharaoh was naturally to echo Angela's oracle, symbolizing the recognition of Amun's position as the king of the kingdom. At the same time, Ammonius also succeeded and replaced Angela in the sacrifice on earth. Immediately after the sacrifice ceremony, the ministers of Igut reported to the gods at the ceremony. All of this, Tutankhamun officially succeeded the throne. There was also a major change in the upper echelons of Igut. Roderick was promoted to the position of prime minister, and was the assistant minister of the young new pharaoh. Roderick wanted to refuse, but George said to him, "Humility is a virtue, and being willing to take responsibility is another virtue, and taking responsibility is often more difficult than humility." Roderick thought about it, and happily accepted the new position. Drick retired and returned to his hometown. Huanzhong was promoted to the position of Minister of Military Affairs. Burke was still the High Priest of the kingdom, and was promoted to the position of Chief High Priest. The former Chief Priest of Cape States, Ibn, was promoted to the position of Chief Priest of the Ammonius Temple in Montefiore, and was also the Chief Priest of Angela's army. The Temple of Seth had become history, and the former Temple of Isis was now called the Temple of Ammonius. Some people regarded Ammon and Angela as the same god, and called him Ammon-Angela. There were also priests who removed the connecting symbol in the name of Angela when writing, and wrote, Angela. In the official sacrifice ceremony of Igut, the priests from then on called the king by his name, Ammon. Roderick, Burke, and the others did not kill the king on the spot, and Merneptah lived a life of imprisonment in the palace for a period of time, and finally died of depression. His soul was also summoned to the underworld, but at that time the underworld was already a hell created by Ammon. On the day of the sacrifice ceremony in Thebes, and the official announcement of the new pharaoh Tutankhamun's succession, Ammon, who had just been worshipped as the king of the kingdom in the coup, was walking on the outskirts of Montefiore. The water rippled, the cool breeze blew, the boats with sails around constantly passed by, and the smoke of smoke curled up over the distant Grange. It looked like Ammon was on an outing, but under his feet were the waves of the Nile River. And the boats passed by, but the boatman could not see the god walking over the waves. There was another god beside Ammon, and he walked arm in arm with Artemis. The wind blew the silver gauze-like robe of Artemis, outlining her beautiful figure, and the green shawl fluttered in the wind. From time to time, it gently tickled Ammon's cheek. Ammon looked at the people on both sides of the river, and asked Artemis, Goddess Batet, revisiting an old place, how do you feel? Artemis covered her mouth and laughed. You call me Batet at a time like this? Ammon. If it wasn't for Batet, why would we go to the underworld? Artemis tightened her grip on Ammon's arm. It's for Ammonius. If Osiris does not accept your guidance, how will you integrate with the divine kingdom of Anila? Oh, I almost forgot. Anila is about to be your name. Ammon changed the subject. I am still the main god of the Ennead divine clan, and I can allow you to enter the realm of the Ennead. But according to the oath of joining the divine clan, when a god outside the divine clan challenges a god of the same divine clan as me, such as you challenging Osiris, I can't help you. If you enter the underworld to settle accounts with Osiris, what should you do? Artemis turned her head and glanced at him. Are you worried that I'm not a match for Osiris? Ammon. In terms of magic power, I can't say who is stronger and who is weaker, but in terms of achievements, you are above Osiris. If you fight in another place, you will definitely win. But if you are in the underworld, the power he can borrow is much stronger than yours, and although you are the creator, there are some means that cannot be used in the mortal world. As long as he stands on the scale formed by the divine artifact, you will definitely not be a match for him. The former goddess Batet should be very clear about this. Artemis smiled charmingly. That's why I dragged you along. According to the oath of the divine clan, if I challenge Osiris, you can't help me. But if you challenge Osiris, I can help you. I think this oath is the funniest agreement between gods. Ammon also laughed. It's funny, but it's not unreasonable. The problem of a divine clan's existence must start from within. Otherwise, how can you find a god to fight first? Artemis blinked mischievously. I found it, and it's a god. Ammon turned his head to look at her. It's not that you found it, it's that you met it. Artemis, if you and Osiris fight in the underworld, and you can't beat him, Ammon interrupted her. You underestimate me too much. Artemis smiled again, and rubbed her cheek against Ammon's shoulder. Then I'm here to watch the show. Ammon couldn't help but rub his cheek against her hair. Just like Schrödinger used to. I fight. You help watch the show? If I can't beat someone, I'll shout, Kitty run. Artemis smiled and asked, Do you know how to shout? Ammon replied, I'm not going to the underworld to fight Osiris, but to verify an achievement. I'm going to merge the divine kingdoms of Anu and Anira with my heaven. And before that, I'm going to merge Osiris's underworld with heaven and hell. To be able to do this in the mortal world, there was another thing that could only be done in the immortal and indestructible eternity. Artemis was surprised. Heaven and hell? Amon smiled. Don't you want to watch the show? Then wait and see. As they spoke, they had arrived at the lower delta of the Nile River, where the rushing river retreated in a fan shape. It was not the flood season now, and large areas of mudflats were exposed along the estuary, dividing the Nile River into many complicated tributaries. One of the tributaries had steep mudflats on both sides. The river was very deep, and it flowed very fast but made almost no sound. Amon and Artemis no longer walked, but stood quietly on the water, and suddenly disappeared under the sun. They entered the space boundary of the underworld. And the river was still the same river, but the river seemed to flow backwards. The world was like a silent painting coming towards them. The river forked ahead, and in the middle was a piece of land. Amon took Artemis's hand and lifted his foot, as if touching the silent world. The two seemed to jump out of the painting, and onto the riverbank. With a roar, a tall three-headed giant dog appeared in front of the two gods. As soon as it saw Amon, then it fell to the ground and rolled into the appearance of a young man, wearing golden armor and holding a long barbed whip. He put away the long whip and saluted. Lord, are you here for the god of the underworld? Artemis stood beside Amon. She raised her hand and pointed at him. Typhon, do you still recognize me? Typhon was stunned. May I ask who you are, goddess? Chapter 295. 276. The cat that vented Typhon looked at Artemis with his mouth wide open, and after a long time he exclaimed, Batet, it's you. Didn't you already perish? How did you become a goddess again? This is impossible. Batet did not explain much, and directly imprinted a message into Typhon's soul, explaining the cause and effect of the matter. Typhon said in an incredulous tone, So you have long been the goddess Artemis of the Olympian divine clan? But you have verified the achievements of the Creator by returning to the human world? Lord Osiris has been practicing hard for many years, and has not broken through this realm. He must be very eager to see you. Artemis sneered. He is not practicing hard, he is running away. Does he think that by hiding in the underworld, he is the god who owns this world? Typhon, you said that Osiris must want to see me. Is this an excuse to open the door to the underworld for me? Typhon smiled bitterly. Even if Lord Osiris does not want to see you, can I stop him with the Lord Amon here? After speaking, he turned around and waved his hand, opening a mysterious portal, and Amon and Artemis walked in side by side. Osiris was a god guided by the Ennead, and he created the underworld to receive the undead who believed in the gods of the Ennead, and also to show the existence of the gods to the undead in some way. Upon entering the underworld, a message would be imprinted into the soul. The horizon that can only be looked at forever is finally under your feet. Amon had been here before, just before he ushered in the test of fate, the judgment of the end of days. He looked at a gushing red sun in the darkness, in which a cat was fighting with a snake, symbolizing the creation of an Ra and the establishment of the divine realm of the Ennead. The two stepped into the red sun, and another world unfolded in front of them, demonstrating the various scenes of the birth of the Ennead divine clan. Through the many portals, at the end of this road, another sentence could be heard in the soul. To enter the world of Osiris, please offer your eyes and heart. At this moment, everything that the undead had done in their lives was clearly replayed in their souls like a flowing river. No one could deceive themselves, let alone the god of the underworld. Next, the undead would walk onto a huge scale, and on the other side would walk another version of himself, symbolizing all the impressions the world had of him, and also symbolizing all the traces he had left for the world he had left behind. This scale was actually made of a divine artifact, and was also the center of the entire Osiris underworld, supporting the underworld's enchanted space. When Amon and Artemis stepped onto the scale, what appeared in front of them was not two other gods of the same kind, but Osiris, the god of the underworld with a staff in his hand. The god of the underworld's appearance had not changed much. He still wore a white crown and had a long wavy beard. He did not salute Amon but nodded slightly and said, "We meet again. Congratulations on your achievement." Amon asked, How do you know about my achievement? Osiris replied. The statues of Seth throughout the realm of Igut collapsed, and the various cities issued such an oracle, and the deceased spirits brought the news to the underworld, so it's not difficult for me to guess what happened. There's just one thing I want to confirm. Why did the oracle say that Anara was the name of Amon? And was it really you who killed Seth? Artemis suddenly interjected. Osiris, no wonder you came here to greet us. It turns out that you have questions to ask. You still put on such airs when you see the Lord of the Underworld. How dare you not salute? Osiris replied. Goddess, are you a new god who has entered the divine realm? I have been away from the divine realm for too long. Please forgive me for not knowing you. I used to be the Lord of the Ennead, so why should I salute this new Lord of the Underworld? Amon chuckled. You're right, I have just killed Seth and become the Lord of the Ennead a few days ago. And you have been the Lord of the Ennead since 1,000 years ago. From this experience, it should be me who salutes you. How is the Lord of the Underworld? With that, Amon bowed to Osiris. Osiris, on the other hand, knelt down and prostrated himself on the ground in a very grand salute. Artemis asked again. Lord of the Underworld, why are you bowing so solemnly at this moment? Osiris stood up and replied. Because Amon killed Seth, and he has just confirmed the news himself, and Seth is my enemy. Then he turned to Amon and said, Lord, why have you come to the underworld? Amon smiled again. You hide in here and don't come out, so if I want to see you, I have to come in myself. Artemis seemed to have come to pick a fight today, and suddenly interjected. Osiris, you are really pathetic. You still remember that you were the Lord of the Ennead 1,000 years ago, and don't salute the Lord of the present day. And you are very pitiful, bowing down because Amon killed Seth, and you have no choice but to thank him for the gift he brought you. There is only hatred for Seth in your heart, and even if Isis defeats Seth, you will not be free, which shows that you will never be as good as Seth. Osiris said angrily. Goddess, I don't know you and I'm not interested in your identity. But please be careful when you speak in front of me, and say that I will never be as good as Seth. Artemis curled her lips. Am I wrong? I used to think that you were a high and mysterious lord of the underworld, but now it is clear that you are just a sad and pitiful guy. Seth may not be a good thing, but he is at least better than you in one way, and he will work hard for his vow. He is a tragedy, and what about you? You closed yourself in the underworld to escape the outside world, and absorbed the power of the undead to heal your wounds. Do you think that's all right? You don't even want to go out of the underworld to face Seth. You don't even know what happened in the divine realm, and everything can only be obtained from the undead in the underworld. Osiris shouted angrily. Back then, Ra made a request that if there was a duel between Seth and me, the loser would not be allowed to return to the divine realm to heal. So I have been staying in the underworld. The gods in the divine realm of Ennead, they also do not set foot in the human world, and only stay in the eternal world of the divine realm. But I have been perceiving the spiritual imprints of all the people in the world. Is this also a tragedy? The sneer on Artemis' face grew wider. Lord of the underworld, are you angry or defending yourself? There are indeed gods in the divine realm of Ennead who no longer set foot in the human world, but their wish is to enjoy eternal life. And you? You want to become the creator. You want to defeat Seth again. And you hide in the underworld as if you have been working hard. But in fact, this so-called effort has no hope, and you know it best. If this is not a tragedy, then what is? Osiris pointed his staff at Artemis and said to Amon, Who is she? Why did you bring her here and talk to me like this? I don't know this goddess, and I'm not interested in what she has to say. Amon smiled bitterly and said, You don't recognize her? Since she doesn't say it herself, it's not good for me to tell you, otherwise it will make her unhappy. In fact, why do you care who she is? Just listen to whether what she says makes sense. Amon did not tell Osiris who Artemis was, and why she came to the underworld and scolded the god of the underworld like this. He didn't want to make her unhappy, so the implication was that he didn't care whether Osiris was happy or not. The sarcasm in Artemis' eyes grew, and she pointed at Osiris and asked, Does it make any difference to you who I am? Do you feel very relaxed now? Do you feel like you're finally free? Because Seth has fallen, and the main god of the Ennead has been replaced. The shadow that has been pressing on your heart for 1,000 years has disappeared, and you can finally come out of the underworld to meet people. But I would like to ask, you have become the god of the underworld and trained hard for 1,000 years, you should know what it is for. Don't you think all this is ridiculous now? What is the point of your existence? Osiris shouted angrily. I am still the god of the Ennead. I don't need you to tell me what to do here. Artemis suddenly laughed out loud, and a message was imprinted into Osiris' soul. She did not say who she was, but introduced a series of changes that happened between the gods after Amon left the underworld last time, focusing on Amon's achievements and Anare's request to Amon, which could be considered as an answer to the question that Osiris raised when they first met. Her laughter was like a sharp blade, piercing into Osiris' soul, and she asked coldly, "The god of the Ennead? You still don't know the situation. Don't you know that the Ennead is about to cease to exist? Anare is the name of Amon, and the divine kingdom of the Ennead will be integrated into Amon's divine kingdom. Where will you go?" Osiris was shocked on the spot, and after a long time, he bowed to Amon and said, "What I did not do you did. The realm that Anare did not break through, you broke through. The achievements that Isis did not seek to prove, you sought to prove them. All of this happened after you left the underworld, and when we meet again, you will have inherited the promise of the god of creation to the gods of the Ennead." The purpose of Amon's visit was to persuade Osiris to accept his guidance and become an angel in the divine kingdom. This was not the submission and allegiance between mortals. It required a real vow in the soul, which could not be forced or falsified. And listening to Osiris' words, he seemed to have been moved, and it was up to Amon to give him new guidance. Artemis, however, interrupted him and shouted, "Osiris, what kind of guidance do you want to accept? Your soul is at a loss in this underworld, and what are your years of so-called penance in seeking to prove? Do you understand? It was in this underworld that Amon faced his final test, and it was you who used your great magic to send him out of the underworld. And then do you know what happened? Seth came and stood guard at the mouth of the Nile River, waiting for the opportunity for Amon to return to Earth to slay him. And Enril of the Anunnaki divine clan also came, in cahoots with Seth. What were you doing at the time? They were just outside your underworld, but you closed yourself up in this so-called world of the underworld and turned a blind eye to them. I sensed that something was wrong and found Amon in the eternal realm, guarding him as he healed, while Morin tried to summon Amon to the plains of Duk. You holed up in the underworld, absorbing the spiritual imprints of the undead, thinking that you were training, thinking that you had everything under control, but in fact, you were running away from everything. Now that Amon has slain Seth, is that really your release? Anare asked Amon to fuse with the divine kingdom of Eru, but it also requires the gods to be able and willing to accept Amon's guidance. Seth has been slain, but the only obstacle has become you, because you are hiding in this underworld unaware of it. All living beings in the world may have their own meaning of existence, but you, who have transcended eternal life, have become a superfluous god. Osiris finally couldn't help but ask directly, "Who exactly are you?" Amon, however, unhurriedly interjected with an inexplicable remark. "God of the underworld, what kind of god we will become depends on how we view living beings." Osiris, however, seemed to be enlightened, and looked at Artemis in amazement. "Badet, you are Badet." Artemis imprinted another message into Osiris' soul, explaining everything, and at the same time glared at him. "I am Batet. What can you do? Don't look at me like that. Please look at Amon, and then look at yourself. In the beginning, there was a mortal who challenged Seth on Earth, and came here on the boat of the underworld. He went out from here, and now he is back, and what are you doing? Your existence is meaningless at all, and today you are even more superfluous. The illusory vow you made to establish the underworld has come to an end. Do you want to know how all this happened? Then please think carefully. What did Amon say to you in the underworld?" Amon asked Osiris why he treated Batet like that in the underworld back then, and he said something to the god of the underworld. "Osiris, I can't blame you, and Schrödinger can't complain. She did make her own choice. In fact, I also know some gods who have truly transcended eternal life, They only enjoy eternal life in their divine kingdoms and don't force themselves to do anything more, while you are still working hard in the underworld. I have also been to the underworld of Anunnaki, and it is indeed not as good as your Ennead, and the underworld King Kella is not as good as you. But I want to say that your training may not be as good as the choice made by Batet, and even less than the wish of Isis. Although Batet is not a god who has transcended eternal life, I think her final choice may be more meaningful than the choice you made at the beginning. If, as you said, a new life exists, why not choose a new life? The most valuable thing to increase one's knowledge of the world is one's own personal experience and confirmation. Although doing so may make you lost forever, it seems like a kind of fall, as if giving up eternal life. And the god named Osiris may also never exist, but perhaps it is closer to the true source of divinity. At the time, Osiris asked Amon contemptuously, "You actually want to guide a god in his training?" Now this dialogue sounded in his soul again, as if it was the voice just now, but the situation had changed. Amon had beheaded Seth, and Osiris had become a superfluous existence in the Ennead, and needed to accept Amon's guidance. And what kind of guidance Amon could give him, in fact, had already been said at the time. It all depended on whether Osiris complied, and how could he comply? Artemis came to the underworld and did not fight with Osiris, but the question just now was tantamount to forcing the existence of a god into a situation where he had to be questioned again. Osiris let out a long sigh, and his figure turned into a cloud of black smoke that dissipated in all directions, and the invisible black smoke also passed through the figures of Amon and Artemis. Amon swayed before he could stand firm, and he felt Osiris's spiritual imprint, including all the confirmations of Osiris's training before and after he became a god of the underworld, as well as all the thoughts of his life. He heard Osiris's last words. "I don't know where I will go, and my spiritual imprint will dissipate, leaving only this last state of mind. I don't want to go to your divine realm, and I don't want to become a superfluous existence among the gods of the Ennead. If there is still the possibility of becoming an unknown, I don't even want to see you again." Osiris left just like that, and the result may be stunning. He was the god of the underworld, and the god who understood the soul the best among the gods of the Ennead, and his last words expressed a very complicated meaning. The death of mortals may also lead to the rebirth of souls, and when a new being is fortunate enough to pass the test of endless life and death, it may also glimpse the spiritual imprint of the past and feel all kinds of mysterious causes and effects. But the gods were different, because they had already transcended eternal life, and once they fell, there would no longer be such a god in the world. There may be a new being born in the world, or there may never be one, but in any case, the spiritual imprint of the god no longer existed. If a new being were to appear, it may only vaguely feel the state of mind at the time of its fall. Even if this being could once again achieve transcendence and eternal life, it would already be a completely different god. Osiris's situation was different from Artemis's. Artemis did not fall back then. She just came to Earth as a cat in the form of a new soul, and when her verification was complete or the life of the cat ended, Artemis would return to the Olympian divine realm. Osiris, on the other hand, was gone, and the god no longer existed. Amon turned his head to look at Artemis and asked, "Have you vented your anger?" In the eyes of the world, Osiris, the god of the underworld, was actually killed by Artemis's scolding, which was simply unimaginable. Artemis's expression at the moment was a bit like Schrödinger's back then, and she replied with puffed cheeks. That was his own choice, and when he faced my questioning, he was in the same situation as I was back then. I was just giving him a result. I didn't mean to force him. Amon sighed. I didn't intend to force Osiris. I just persuaded him to accept another kind of guidance and get true liberation. And you were powerful enough to make him kill himself with just a few words. But from the source of the grudge, it's not really clear who was right and who was wrong. Artemis shrunk her shoulders and half turned to bury her face in Amon's chest. How could Schrödinger be so powerful? It's only because you're around that he seems powerful. You came to solve the problem, and didn't Osiris kill himself solve it all the same? Now that the god of the underworld has fallen, what do you plan to do with this underworld? Amon stretched out his right hand and patted her on the back. You were so focused on venting your anger that you didn't notice the changes around you. Kat finally vented her anger. Chapter 296. Artemis looked up in Amon's arms and saw Amon's left hand first. A ball of light flew out of his palm, and the suspended ball of light enlarged and turned into a small scale, which was the artifact that Osiris used to build the center of the underworld. Amon took this artifact out of the depths of the underworld, and the array pivot that supported the entire boundary of the underworld disappeared. But the underworld did not collapse, because Amon created another underworld and merged it with it. The process of taking out the artifact, transforming and merging it with the underworld was also a new sacrificial refining of the artifact. Amon handed it to Artemis and said, "Anyway, at least in the eyes of the world, Osiris was scolded to death by you, and it should be your trophy. I have refined and erased the soul mark of this thing, and it is called the Scale of Judgment." Artemis asked, "You don't keep it for yourself?" Amon shook his head. "You should be the one to take it." Artemis took the Scale of Judgment and said, "Then I'll accept it. It happens that one of the Olympian gods wants this thing, and this god has a little relationship with you, so it makes sense for her to take it. Anyway, if it stays in your hands, it may be given to some disciple." Amon asked curiously, "Oh, there is another goddess in the Olympian kingdom who has something to do with me? Which god is she, and what's going on?" Artemis shook her head gently and said, "You are not an Olympian god, and it is not convenient for me to tell you the secrets of the Olympian school. You will understand when you see her." As she spoke, she looked up and suddenly let out a cry of surprise. They saw that the appearance of the underworld had changed silently, and the huge scale under their feet had disappeared, and the two were standing on a strange dividing line. On the left was the blue sky and white clouds. The green grass spread out like a shade. The distant mountains were full of flowers, and the sound of running water was like cheerful music drifting faintly in the wind. Not far to the right, there was a tree. Its bare branches were gray and had no leaves. The strangely shaped branches were like a strange claw reaching towards the sky. Scorching smoke rose from the bottom of the tree, as if the depths of the earth were burning. Not far away, there was a river flowing with a black, oily liquid. The surface of the river was still burning, and everywhere it passed, there was a scorching aura of death. As far as the eye could see, there seemed to be no end to the scene. Artemis murmured, "Is this what you call heaven and hell? They are actually in the same place." Amon smiled faintly. "That's right. It's a place that I've recreated after absorbing the structural experience of the various divine clans of the Heaven's Pivot continent. After all, it's still the home of the undead. It's still a different kind of underworld." Artemis added, "It is not surprising that Hades is called hell, but the Hades you created is also called heaven, which is also your divine kingdom. It is truly unimaginable." Amon smiled. "Who cares if it's heaven or hell? Just call it Hades according to your habit. Do you see the difference?" Artemis narrowed her eyes and said, "I have seen the Hades of the Olympus divine clan, and I have also guarded the Hades for Osiris of the Ennead divine clan as Batet, and I also know what's going on with the Hades of Kella of the Anunnaki divine clan. Those Hades are the same as this place, both of which receive the undead, but there is a big difference. The Hades has always been the source of divine power for the Hades, no matter what happens to the undead in the Hades, and the Hades are mainly built for the god of the underworld. The god of the underworld is the god who practices necromancy in every divine clan. Your place is different, it is mainly built for the undead. The so-called god of the underworld has only become a watcher and guide." "Who inspired you?" Amon explained. "I once met a great awakener named Umitba, and this was inspired by his disciple Xitigarbha." "Is the Hades built for the god of the underworld or for the undead?" "This has never seemed to be a problem. The existing divine clans all have the Hades to receive the believers of the undead. The Hades is important to the divine clans because it holds the secrets of almost everything on earth and strengthens people's faith in the gods in another way. Because the question of life and death has always been the ultimate consideration of people. On the other hand, the Hades is also the source of divine power for the god of the underworld. And what people fear may be the will of the god of the underworld. But Xitigarbha once showed Amon that the nether world he wished to create was completely different from the Hades that Amon knew. Xitigarbha observed the undead in the nether world, and although it was also a kind of wish practice for him, the Hades itself was created for those undead, so that these undead could feel some kind of guidance left by Amitba in the world, not for Xitigarbha himself. This was also the reason why Amon created the Hades. It did not exist mainly for the existence of the gods, but for the undead who came here to witness, or to accept some kind of judgment. But there was no judge in the Hades. The so-called judge was the undead itself, which was a reference to the magical function of the huge scale in the original Ennead. What Amon created was heaven and hell, and what was different from Xitigarbha's netherworld? What was witnessed in the netherworld was reincarnation, while what was witnessed in heaven and hell was judgment. When the undead entered the netherworld, they entered what Xitigarbha called the barren bright realm. In an instant, the experience of their life would be clearly reflected, and the things that were unclear in this life would be clear at this moment. The undead would recall everything they had experienced, including the feelings they had left on others, the true thoughts of others, and so on. The emotion of this moment was indescribable, and then the heart of reincarnation and the heart of remorse would alternate. Almost everyone would think of a question. What would happen if they could start all over again? With this thought, the barren bright realm would reverse, as if their life had really started all over again. Many people in this world had the desire to be reborn. They often fantasized about what it would be like if they could go back to the past and start all over again. Sometimes they imagined that they could start all over again in this life, and sometimes it turned into another kind of wish, to travel to a certain era in history, and start all over again with the background of the whole world. These two ideas were actually the same thing, but they were based on different wishes. The first kind of wish was based on the regrets of one's life experiences, and a reimagining of what one had done. The second kind of wish was a kind of regret for the historical background in one's life, and a reimagining of the world outside one's body. But these two wishes originated from the same beginning, and that was the heart of reincarnation. When people lived in this world, the heart of reincarnation was just a fantasy or a yearning. But when the undead entered the barren bright realm, they could witness this heart of reincarnation. But there was a fact that couldn't be changed by people's wishes, and that was when a person truly witnessed the heart of reincarnation, they might not be able to eliminate their regrets. Being able to foresee the future couldn't truly change themselves. Even if they transcended an era and returned to the past, they wouldn't be able to truly transcend the era they came from, if they were still the same person. When the undead witnessed the heart of reincarnation in the barren bright realm, it was like starting all over again in life. Those who sought wealth could obtain wealth. Those who sought fame could become famous. Some people could become extremely wealthy, and some people could establish unparalleled achievements. Some people might rule the world, thinking that they could kill and intimidate all living beings. Some people might be overflowing with ruthlessness, thinking that their desires were unimpeded and unrestrained. But the barren bright realm didn't just witness the heart of reincarnation. It also witnessed the heart of remorse. The so-called heart of remorse wasn't the person's own remorse, but the imprints they left behind that reflected on themselves. How they treated the world would view them as well. The imprints they left in the world would imprint the feelings of their soul. The barren bright realm was the witness of the soul anew. Everything would be reflected back, allowing one to truly feel it clearly. It was something that couldn't be described with words. If a person lived in this world only as a fantasy, they wouldn't be able to feel all of this. But when the undead entered the barren bright realm to witness the heart of reincarnation, the heart of remorse that followed would drag the soul into an unimaginable torment of hell. One thought extinguishes fate, and another thought creates fate. The netherworld could witness the endless heart of reincarnation and the heart of remorse, allowing the undead to assume and redo again and again. If the soul's vow wasn't truly liberated, then it would enter an endless state of reincarnation, known as the infernal hell. At this time, the thought of remorse was different from the human world. It was an eternal moment, and also a moment of eternity. What kind of soul a person had was already determined when he was alive. Amon created heaven and hell, And people themselves already lived in heaven or hell, they just witnessed it when they passed away. The underworld created by Amon drew inspiration from Xitigarbha's netherworld, as well as the ingenuity of the scales of judgment in the underworld of Osiris. It also reflected the heavenly realm he created, which was different from the netherworld of the various divine systems. It became a heaven and a hell of two sides. Artemis had already achieved the creator level, so she naturally saw the mystery of this world. She asked Amon with a faint smile, "I know who your hell is for. What about heaven?" Amon replied, "There are also many people in this world who, although not guided by the power of origin, have a transcendent soul, so they will naturally come to heaven. The so-called heaven is still a moment of eternity or a moment of eternity. This underworld is the image of heaven that I have projected here, and they are like angels in heaven." Artemis frowned slightly. "So the heaven you created is like this. The undead who have not transcended eternal life can't distinguish it. But after all, this is not true transcendence of eternal life. This is still the world of the undead. How can the undead in it leave?" Amon replied leisurely, "They can leave voluntarily, with a certain wish, no matter how long they spend in heaven. It is only equivalent to a moment in the human world." Artemis asked again, "How can the undead in hell be liberated?" The hell created by Amon was also different from the infernal hell in the netherworld. It was to let a person witness their true self, and then witness the self that they wanted to be in their vow, repeatedly questioning, like the unquenchable fire in hell. Amon smiled slightly. "Until they can be liberated, it is only equivalent to a moment in the human world." Artemis looked around and said, "You actually used heaven to project the underworld. Such guidance is very attractive in the human world. Is this temptation or coercion?" Amon shrugged. "Maybe it's nothing. I just created such a world of the undead, as you can see." Artemis said thoughtfully, "I can see that more and more people will believe in you. You are very smart." Amon said with a faint smile, "Maybe I'm more charming." Artemis burst out laughing, punched him and said, "You've learned to talk like that too?" Amon replied, "After witnessing so much in the human world, what else can I not learn? This is not some incredible magical power, it's just a little trick, inspired by the artists playing with puppets in the Pantheon Square." Artemis frowned again. "This underworld seems perfect, and there will be more and more people who believe in you. But as you can see, there are very few people in the world who truly understand the soul. There are very few people who truly understand the soul. Even if people believe in you, it is only with their own understanding, and there will be more and more believers who judge others in your name." Amon shrugged again. "That is the choice of the world, and conflicts in the human world have always been like this. I am just using this way to prove my vows and leave my guidance in the thousands of paths that people understand." Artemis turned her head to look at him. "You are very indifferent." Amon also looked at her with a wry smile. "I have been like this since I was a child. You watched me grow up." Before his voice trailed off, he suddenly turned his head to the right and looked into the distance. "There is an undead coming. It is the pharaohs of Igut, Merneptah. He is so timely." Artemis sighed inexplicably and gently stroked Amon's arm. "It's time for me to go too. Thank you for helping me vent my anger. And thank you for showing me the heaven and hell you have created." Then another voice said, "Batet no goddess Artemis, will you please guide me?" Artemis turned and replied, "Typhon, you want to leave the Ennead and join the Olympian divine clan?" The speaker was Typhon, the gatekeeper of the underworld of Osiris, the golden three-headed dog. He bowed to the ground at the boundary between heaven and hell and said, "I am an oracle guided by Osiris. Osiris has left, and this heaven and hell no longer need a gatekeeper like me. But what I practice is the Book of the Dead of the Ennead, and you have also practiced it before, so I ask for your guidance. If a god falls, the oracle he guides can leave the divine clan, or ask for the guidance of another god in the divine clan." The choice Typhon made was different from that of the other oracles in the Ennead. He was more willing to accept the guidance of Artemis, who had the same experience as him, and at the same time leave the Ennead. Artemis said to Amon, "See, not all oracles are willing to choose you, the Lord of Heaven." Then she said to Typhon, Then you will come with me to the Olympian divine clan. The underworld of Hades is missing a gatekeeper like you." Amon waved his hand and said, "Since Typhon has a choice, then go. I will merge the divine kingdom of Ennead and the divine kingdom of Anra. The gods of the Ennead and the gods of Anunnaki will be angels in heaven, and I will send Kella and Nergal to take care of the underworld." Amon fulfilled his promise to Artemis and accompanied her to the underworld to find Osiris and settle accounts, but the result of settling accounts was the creation of heaven and hell. Artemis left as she wished, returning to the mortal world, and flying with Typhon across the vast sea to the divine realm of Olympus. She should have been very happy, but her expression was a little sullen, as if she had lost something. She played with the trophy in her hand and did not speak along the way. Typhon asked cautiously, "My goddess, is there something that makes you unhappy?" Artemis sighed and looked at the scales of judgment in her hand. "I have fulfilled my old wish with Osiris and obtained such a trophy. How can I not be happy?" Typhon plucked up his courage and said, "Goddess, what you really want is not this artifact, but a god, right?" Artemis glared at him. "Who are you talking about?" Typhon shrank his neck. "Forget I said anything." Artemis did not argue with him. Flying in the clouds, she looked at the sea level in the distance and said, "Seeing the underworld like that is equivalent to witnessing the heavenly realm he created and understanding his achievements. It was impossible for such a deity to join the Olympian pantheon. I always have a hunch that something I don't want to see will happen between me and Amon, but I can't describe what this feeling is." Amon created heaven and hell, watched Artemis leave, then stepped into the void, and seemed to stay in place, but Gabriel appeared in front of him. He came directly to heaven, and as Artemis saw, heaven and hell were the reflections of heaven on earth, which for the transcendence guided by him was nothing more than directly crossing from the mortal world to an indescribable space and time. Gabriel bowed and said, "My God, you have created the underworld and are going to fuse with the divine realm of Eru? I have been ordered to wait in heaven for the arrival of the other angels, but their test has not yet come." Amon shook his head. "I don't need to go anywhere to fuse with the divine realm of Eru. I can do it here." Gabriel exclaimed, "Then I will have the honor of being the only angel to witness this great moment." Amon, however, shook his head again. "There's no hurry. I still have to wait for the arrival of another angel. If he is fortunate enough to ascend to heaven, he must be badly injured, so let's heal him first." Gabriel said with some surprise, "Which of your disciples will face the test at this time?" "I think the next one to ascend to heaven should be Michael the Seagull, but even he won't be that fast." Amon stretched out his hand and pointed to the void. "It's not the disciple in the Garden of Eden. Do you see him?" Gabriel exclaimed softly. "So it's him. The situation is a bit dangerous." Chapter 297. In the depths of the deserted Saya Desert, a terrifying scene appeared. A gray vortex tore through the sky, and in the midst of the black lightning, a strong figure was frantically waving his arms that had turned into giant pincers. The Scorpion King Giraffe's body was shrouded in a translucent light, comparable to the toughest armor in the world, but under the strike of the black lightning, the light was torn apart layer by layer. His roar echoed in the desert, and the surrounding endless sand dunes seemed to tremble with his roar. After an unknown amount of time, a crack seemed to appear in the immortal eternity, and a giant scorpion with thick smoke fell into heaven. Its two pincers were broken. Its huge scorpion tail hung limply on the ground. Its body was scorched, and the incomparably tough scorpion shell had terrible cracks. Giraffe was very lucky, somewhat because of his tyrannical bloodline. He passed the final test and did not get lost in the immortal eternity, and was brought to heaven by Amon. But he was a little dizzy and had not yet recovered, and was still in the demon form that had been seriously injured in the test, powerlessly waving the broken pincers, but unable to get up. A golden light fell on him, and at this time he heard the voice of Amon. "Giraffe, congratulations on transcending eternal life. This is my heaven. You are already a different existence. The body is the heart, the form is the spirit, and the existence is also consciousness." With the golden light and the voice, Giraffe seemed to be awakened. The wounds on his body disappeared, and he turned back into a normal human form, but his expression was very weak. He turned over and sat up, saying, "My God, thank you for your guidance." At some point, Aman was standing in front of him and said with a smile, "The road to transcending eternal life is your own path. I just gave you the final guidance to heaven. You are badly injured and need to recuperate for a period of time. The injuries suffered by angels are different from those of mortals. It is a kind of loss of physical and spiritual power. You will not feel pain if you do not want to, but recovery still requires cultivation." "Angel?" Giraffe was startled for a moment, then laughed and said, "I, the Scorpion King, have now become a scorpion." Then he sighed and said, "I wonder what happened to the Lion King Yugalu who ran away with someone? Since I can come to the kingdom of heaven, he should be able to as well. If I had known earlier, I would have kept him here." Aman shook his head and said, "Everyone has their own luck and opportunities. Maybe he received another kind of guidance, and could transcend eternal life in another way. This isn't inevitable for living beings. No matter what, you've put in 1,000 years of hard work." Gabriel walked over and asked, "Angel Scorpion, you're the second angel to come here other than Aman, the master of heaven. Do you want to stay in the kingdom of heaven to heal? Or do you have other plans?" The Scorpion King bowed to Aman, then stood up and bowed to Gabriel, replying, "I plan to rest here until my injuries are better. I request to go to the human world to recuperate. After some things are settled, I will return to the kingdom of heaven to enjoy eternal peace, and become the guardian angel here." Aman smiled again. "That's how it should be. You still have a divine palace deep in the desert, right? I'll temporarily stabilize your injuries, then you can go back and arrange things in the human world before coming to the kingdom of heaven. Even if you're in the kingdom of heaven, you can go back from time to time." The Scorpion King said, "Thank you, my God." Looking back at the human world, I realized how lucky I was. How many scorpions would there be a mutated scorpion? And how many years would it take for a sentient scorpion to appear? How lucky would a scorpion demon like me have to reach the other shore of immortality? I'll stay in the human world for a while, but if you and the kingdom of heaven summon me, I'll come immediately." Gabriel added, "Scorpion King, you should first stabilize your realm, adjust to the new way of existence, and then go to the Saya Desert when you're fine. But don't be too anxious, there's a great initiative going on right now. Ammonius is going to merge the divine kingdoms of Ennead and the Anunnaki, and you're lucky to be one of the witnesses." The Scorpion King shouted, "Is that so? How did I get so lucky?" It would still take time for Giraffe to fully recover, but under Aman's personal blessing, his body and soul were no longer hindered, and it was finally time to merge the divine kingdoms. Aman said to Gabriel and Giraffe, "You two withdraw from the kingdom of heaven, and watch from the eternal." In the divine kingdoms of Ennead and the Anunnaki, the gods of creation said the same thing to the gods. The gods of the Ennead and the Anunnaki also withdrew from the divine kingdom, watching the image of the lotus of the absolute beginning, and the scroll of destiny in the eternal, which was the outline of the divine kingdom. For Gabriel and Giraffe, who were guided by Aman, the manifestation of the kingdom of heaven was a golden light that their souls saw in the eternity of unborn and indestructible. This golden light gradually spread and turned into a petal-shaped mist of light, and then the image of a lotus appeared in the void. The white petals unfolded one by one, and a gushing red sun appeared in the center of the flower, shrouded in golden light. Where was the divine kingdom of Ennead now? It was right there, in the golden light. This was a concept that mortals could not understand, because there was no difference in time and space in the eternal, and the kingdom of heaven and the divine kingdom could be said to be extremely far away, but also extremely close. When Aman unfolded the lotus of the beginning in his soul, it was equivalent to entering the divine kingdom of Ennead, and the divine kingdom and the kingdom of heaven merged into one. Then the red sun sank into the center of the flower, and the lotus gradually closed, turning into a golden light again. The divine kingdom of Ennead disappeared from then on, but it still existed for eternity. The golden light gradually unfolded again, and densely packed goddesses appeared on it, turning into the appearance of a Zhengshu Jian. The Anunnaki divine kingdom also appeared here, and the scroll of destiny spread out as if endless, and then gradually rolled up, turning back into a golden light, and the divine characters slowly faded away, as if they had been strangely fused together. When the golden light quietly returned to its original state, the gods of Ennead and the Anunnaki all felt an inexplicable call and guidance, passing through time and space and appearing in a different world. Amun sat on the source of the Nile River, on the ice of the Saya Plateau, and on the mountainside of the Kingdom of Heaven. Every angel felt that this world seemed familiar, as it mysteriously extended and had merged with the original divine kingdom. The gods of Ennead and the Anunnaki had already received the guidance of Amun when they entered the Kingdom of Heaven, and now they were angels in the Kingdom of Heaven. They bowed together and said, "My God, the only God." Among all these angels, Girth, who had passed the test the latest and had just arrived in the Kingdom of Heaven, was now like a veteran guide, standing beside Amun and laughing at the crowd. "Welcome, angels. Ha ha ha, I came a step earlier than you. If there's anything you don't understand, I can introduce it to you." Murin knew the ins and outs of Girth, and looking around at the brand new Kingdom of Heaven, she smiled and asked Girth, "Do you see my palace? How is it different from before?" Girth was stumped by the question, and scratched his head a little embarrassedly. "I don't know where your previous palace was. There are many mountains and rivers here, and there are many palaces distributed among them. Which one is yours?" But Amun suddenly said, "Ea, do you see your world?" The shock in Ea's eyes had not yet faded, and he hurriedly bowed and replied, "I see it, my God, the Lord of Heaven. I have accepted your guidance, and my world is unfolding in the Kingdom of Heaven." Amun's Kingdom of Heaven was a fusion of the divine kingdoms of Ennead and the divine kingdoms of Anunnaki, and it was equivalent to an extension. Everything in the Kingdom of Heaven was still there, but there was a wonderful change. Ea was originally the god of wisdom of the Anunnaki, the god with the highest realm after the god of creation, and he had already achieved the level of the creator. He had also created his own world by relying on the Kingdom of Heaven, which was the same as the world that Seth created by relying on the divine kingdom of Ennead. No matter how rich and colorful the world of the creator was, it belonged only to him, and other gods could not enter it. Amun had seen Seth's world before, and it was like a drop of dew on the lotus of the beginning, and only Seth himself could hide in it. But now that Ea had accepted Amun's guidance and had made a different vow, his world was unfolding towards the angels. It was not that his cultivation had increased in an instant, but that the path he had confirmed had changed, and at the same time, it was also because of the miraculous guidance of Amun. The creator became an angel and worshipped Amun as the one and only God, which was tantamount to integrating his own spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge into the Kingdom of Heaven. His world was still his, but it was also equivalent to Amun's. This was a sacrifice guided by Amun's current realm. The one and only God was not just a title, but a real confirmation. From the perspective of some selfish people, Ea, as the creator, could have enjoyed his own world alone, but at this moment, he sacrificed it to Amun and became a part of the Kingdom of Heaven. It seemed like he was at a disadvantage. But this was the guidance he had accepted, the vow to enter the Kingdom of Heaven. In other words, if Ea was unwilling, Amun would not be able to integrate the Anunnaki divine kingdom, and even the original god of creation, Anu, could not do anything about it. So before Amun fused with the Ennead, he would go to kill Seth and persuade Osiris, and Anila had always hoped that he would do so. At this moment, Amun asked kindly, "Yea, other than that, what is the difference between this Kingdom of Heaven and the original Kingdom of Heaven?" Before Ye could answer, Murin suddenly said, "Oh, I understand. Why you can leave the Kingdom of Heaven and go to the human world, and the Kingdom of Heaven will not collapse." As she spoke, there was a projection of message magic, and the angels suddenly understood the difference in the Kingdom of Heaven. Murin smiled and said, "I can build myself a rose garden in the Kingdom of Heaven here." Although the divine kingdom created by the original God of creation could receive the angels to enjoy the carefree eternal life, the gods could not build palaces or anything else for themselves in the Kingdom of Heaven, because everything was created by the soul of the God of creation. If they wanted a palace, a garden, a mountain, a river, or a lake, they would have to ask the God of creation to create it. Unless they became the creator, they could attach themselves to the Kingdom of Heaven and create a world of their own. but that world would not exist for any of the gods. If they broke through the achievements of the Creator and became another god of creation, it would be equivalent to breaking away from the divine system and building another divine system, and this was Seth's wish. Amon's achievements had surpassed that of the god of creation, and regardless of whether Amon was present or not, the angels could use everything that had been created in the kingdom of heaven to build their own gardens and palaces. In a sense, it was very similar to the scene in the human world. If the angels' achievements were higher, like EA today, then they would no longer be the creator in the original sense, but would become archangels, able to create things that originally did not exist in the kingdom of heaven. However, whatever the angels built or created in the kingdom of heaven would be integrated into Amon's spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge, and Amon would also be able to control it. This was an amazing achievement, and Amon had completed a vow that amazed the gods. If one were to compare the archangel with the other divine systems from the perspective of the realm of achievement, the Creator seemed to be equivalent, but it could not be compared so absolutely. Amon had established a completely different divine system, and the guidance that the angels followed was also a different system. Amon was a different god. Today Amon might have fulfilled a prophecy. The god of the gods. Where did Anu and Anila, the original masters of the kingdom of heaven, go? To be honest, Amon also did not know. The two made a vow and went to the human world in the form of a new soul, but in a sense they were still here. The spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge of the creation of the kingdom of heaven had been integrated into Amon's soul and the kingdom of heaven. Amon was the former Anu and Anila. The god of creation was already the end of a path. If they left, the kingdom of heaven would collapse. If there was a pursuit of a higher realm, they had to give up in order to gain something. So Anu and Anila no longer existed at present, but these two did not fall. Instead, it was a new beginning. Their souls drifted in the human world, and it was unknown how many times they would go through endless rebirths, until one day they could verify their vow and understand the cause and effect of all this. But could they verify it? Even if the new life was lucky enough to receive the guidance of the power of origin, how many people in the world could transcend eternal life? If they did not have this luck, they would only be floating in a river that flowed endlessly. If they had this luck, when faced with the judgment of fate, they might really fall. Even if they transcended eternal life and became gods, they would be a new god, and it would have nothing to do with the former Anu or Anila. This new god would have to find another path and break through the vow of the original god of creation. Only then would the soul understand everything, and the test at this time could also cause the real gods to fall. If they were lucky enough to fulfill their vow, then of course, they would no longer be Anu or Anila, but an existence that no one knew about at present. Whether all of this could happen, the hope was infinitely slim. And even if it could happen, who knew how much time and space it would take? Amon showed the angels everything in the kingdom of heaven, and then let everyone return to their palaces. They had accepted new guidance, but some things did not need to change. For example, some angels just wanted to enjoy eternal life and peace in the kingdom of heaven, and that was the promise that Amon inherited from Anu and Anila. The angels saluted and dispersed, and almost all the original Anunnaki gods ran to the divine kingdom of Ana to see what was going on. Only Morin stayed in place and hooked her finger at Amon, as if she had something to say. She pouted as if she wanted to leave. Seeing this, the Scorpion King bowed to Amon and said, "I, the sword god, should also return to the Saya desert. If the kingdom of heaven summons me, I will come immediately." Amon quietly gestured to Murin, and then to Sishui. "Wait a little longer, welcome a new angel." Sishui reacted quite quickly and said in surprise, "Who is going to pass the test and come to the kingdom of heaven?" Gabriel replied, "It's Michael the Seagull. It's not easy for anyone to pass the test, but his situation should be much better than yours." Before his voice trailed off, a figure suddenly appeared at the boundary of the kingdom of heaven. It was Michael the Seagull. He looked a little dusty and did not transform into a powerful demonic form, but a pair of huge wings spread out behind him, the feathers incomplete and still carrying smoke that had not been burned out. Gabriel let out a long whistle, and the whistle carried a message imprinted in the soul. telling the seagull where he had come and teaching him what kind of existence it was after transcending eternal life. The seagull's reaction was much more refreshing than Sishui's, and he immediately let out a long whistle in response. With a flap of his wings, the smoke and dust dispersed, and the pair of wings became white and flawless again. Sishui looked to his side in surprise. At the same time that Gabriel let out a long whistle, a pair of white wings spread out behind him with a bang. At this time, the seagull had come to Amon, spread his wings and bowed. "My God, thank you for your guidance. I have finally witnessed your kingdom of heaven." Amon smiled and nodded. "You came at the right time. I'm going on a long journey to the human world. On the journey, I'll think about more questions and seek more answers. You and Gabriel will guard this kingdom of heaven, and also pay attention to everything in the Garden of Eden, and prepare to welcome the arrival of other angels, if they are as lucky as you." The seagull got up and bowed to Murin, Gabriel, and Sishui. Finally, he smiled at Sishui and said, "Scorpion King, I have heard from the Garden of Eden that you have come to Kingdom of Heaven, and now I have the opportunity to congratulate you in person." Sishui laughed and said, "I want to congratulate you too. Don't call me Scorpion King anymore, call me Scorpion Sishui or Scorpion King Angel. You and Gabriel both have such a pair of wings, and it doesn't look like a transformation magic. Is this the symbol of an angel?" The seagull replied honestly, "Yes, Ammonius' disciples have refined such a pair of wings, symbolizing the yearning of the soul to soar." Murin interjected from the side, "Scorpion King Angel, you also have to practice the Garden of Eden and refine such a pair of wings." Sishui frowned slightly. "A scorpion with white pigeon wings, isn't it too funny?" Chapter 298. Girth, on the other hand, asked Murin, "What about you? You are also an angel in heaven now. Do you also need to refine a pair of wings like this?" Murin giggled and did not reply. With a bang, a pair of pure white wings unfurled from her back. The goddess had long known that this day would come, and had already refined the wings of an angel, then turned her head and asked Amon with a smile, "Do I look like this on Liliang Mountain?" Amon smiled and said, "Of course, Liliang. Just like the beauty of an angel. Scorpion King, go back to the Syrian desert. Gabriel and the seagulls guard heaven. I still have something to say to Murin, and then I will go to earth." After speaking, Amon disappeared in front of the angels and appeared with Murin in her heavenly palace, which was very much like the rose garden Murin built on the Assyrian plateau on earth. Murin looked at the fine and colorful flowers and grass on the plateau and asked faintly, "You created such a heavenly realm, and everything the angels created and built in heaven is seen by your soul. This is a realm that even ordinary gods can't imagine. Why do you want to go on a long journey to earth? What questions are you going to pursue and what answers are you going to prove?" Amon did not answer directly, but said with a smile, "As far as I know, the achievements of Zeus of Olympus are no less than mine. And so is Marduk. Although our vows are different and the directions of proof are different, after all, we are all existences that surpass the gods of creation. I once waited for Darius in a roadside tavern, but what I waited for was the incarnation of Marduk's proof. When I was talking to Marduk, another person appeared next to me, most likely Zeus. Their achievements are no less than mine at this time. What are they still seeking on earth? I know the achievements that Marduk wants to prove, and I can understand the world he wants to create. So what about Zeus?" The communication of the gods was not only in words, but also in voices. Amon had already imprinted the scene of his encounter with Marduk and the middle-aged man in the roadside tavern into Murin's soul. Murin pouted slightly and said, "Do you want to learn from Zeus? He said he was going to pick up girls. Are you going to pick up girls too?" Murin was obviously a little angry. Amon smiled and said nothing. Murin said again, "Don't think that I don't know what you did in the underworld of Osiris. It was to avenge your cat. Did you have fun making Osiris kill himself on the spot?" Amon still smiled and did not answer. In the eyes of the gods, the cause and effect of this matter was naturally clear. Murin just wanted to tease Amon, so Amon just smiled and listened. His smile looked very simple and honest. At this moment, Murin smiled again. and her smile became very charming. She looked up at Amon and said, "So you also know how to make me happy? What happened?" Just as Amon smiled and said nothing, the high priests of the main shrines of Igut received an oracle to build statues of Murin in the shrines of the cities all over the country and offer sacrifices to her. Amon did not ask the cities of Igut to replace the original statues of Amon and carve new ones of him, because the statues did not need to be rebuilt in the first place. Today Amon was Amon. But after Tutankhamun ascended the throne, many new buildings were completed all over Igut, both civilian and official. According to tradition, important buildings were painted with statues of gods, and people still had to build new statues for Amon. And in the major shrines, the statues of Archangel Seth had collapsed. Which angels should be placed in their original positions? They couldn't just leave such a space on the solemn altar empty, could they? People were also praying to Amon, asking for the oracle's instructions. After Amon merged the divine kingdoms of Ennead and Anunnaki, the original gods of Ennead and Anunnaki became angels in heaven, and the first oracle he gave was to build a statue of Murin. In fact, even if Amon did not give the oracle, the Prime Minister of Igut, Roderick, would have done so, because the shrines in Talang were worshipped for Amon and Murin. Amon originally only had one shrine on Earth, which was built by Link and the cavemen in Talang. Probably because they had no experience or prejudices, it was very different from the style of the shrines in the other parts of the continent. On the altar, Amon stood there with his arms around Murin, and although the statue was very lifelike, it did not look dignified enough. Since the existing shrines of Amon were in such a form, Roderick would also refer to it. But the form of the statue would naturally not be as frivolous as the shrine of Talang. Murin stood on the altar, looking dignified and dignified, right next to Amon, where Seth used to be. Because of the oracle of Amon, in the myths and legends of the later generations of Igut, Murin was called Ammonius' wife. Word of mouth among the people and the transcription of the classics over the generations, along with the change of language, and later, Murin was called Mute, but this was something that happened many years later. Amon did not speak but gave such an oracle, so Murin smiled at that time. And this smile was like the dark clouds in the sky dissipating. In fact, Amon himself did not care whether his statue would be erected on the altar or not, because his understanding and confirmation of the realm of the source of divine power had gone beyond the concept of a certain kingdom or a certain divine clan. As long as there were people who accepted his guidance and had a firm belief, then the world would be his realm of the source of divine power. But when he was Ammonius, after all, he was still the main god that the people of Igut believed in, and he did not reject this method of kingdom sacrifice. It was just a choice for the people to believe in him. As for the angel Murin, she naturally preferred this method of drawing power from the divine realm, because she was, after all, born of the Anunnaki divine clan, a traditional god. Murin looked at Amon and smiled, but suddenly frowned slightly, and said worriedly, "During the time you were fusing with the divine realm, you had no time to pay attention to the affairs of the world, and your prophecy back then has come true." Darius ascended the throne of Poti and continued the expansion of the Cyrus era, and Igut is still a vassal state of Poti. If the situation continues to develop like this, sooner or later your position as the main god in Igut will be lost, and the realm of the source of divine power will gradually be lost. Amon asked with a smile. "Annexed by whom?" Murin mused. "Either by Zeus or Marduk, and Darius' army has entered the United Kingdom of Hilton." Amon asked again, "So what? I have said long ago that I have no intention of becoming such a god. And my realm of the source of divine power does not have to be that kind of realm. The divine realm of Anunnaki has been annexed by Marduk, but what about the divine kingdom of Anunnaki and the gods?" Murin also smiled. "There doesn't seem to be any loss, because the Anunnaki divine clan no longer exists, and the gods have all become angels in heaven." Then she reached out and patted Amon on the chest again. Marduk expanded his territory on Earth and defeated the kingdoms owned by Anunnaki and the Ennead. But you sought proof in the undying eternity, fusing the Anunnaki and the Ennead divine realm. You are all victors. But disputes and upheavals in the world, the rise and fall of kingdoms, have happened countless times over the millennia, and in the undying eternity, there is no such meaningful struggle. The world that a god can open up is infinitely vast, and it depends on how great his achievements and magical power are. Murin's words were also an annotation to the word transcendence. The concept of space and time in the undying eternity was different from that of the mortal world, and the space and time that could be opened up was infinite. The size of the world created by the gods symbolized the realm, knowledge, and magical power of the gods themselves, and there was no conflict and competition like in the mortal world. The expansion of the Boss Empire was a kind of human achievement, allowing Marduk to enjoy a wider realm of divine power, and naturally it was of great benefit to the gods. Amon deeply understood this when he became the king of the Ennead divine clan. But from another perspective, in the world after transcendence, there was no such competition. Amon created the divine realm and merged the Anunnaki and the Ennead divine realms, and the achievements he had achieved as a god were no less than what Marduk had achieved on earth. Amon patted the back of Murin's hand and said, "Since you understand this truth, why were you so emotional just now?" Murin replied, "It is precisely because of this truth. You see how beautiful this divine realm is, and you have already surpassed the limits of human desire, so why do you still go to the mortal world in person, and get involved in that unknown dispute?" Amon smiled. "Because I still have vows that have not been verified. Why did Anu and Anya leave, and why did Marduk and Zeus appear on earth? The answer is similar." Murin pointed somewhere in the void and said, "Is that the Zeus you met? He is now a king and is fighting Marduk on the battlefield." Amon also saw somewhere on earth, where a fierce battle was taking place. Darius the Great of Boz was leading his invincible 10,000-man army, and was attacking a pass. And the commander in charge of defending the pass was the middle-aged man Amon had met in the tavern. His name was not Zeus but Leone. The kingdom of Hilton was not a unified country, but closer to the concept of a country that believed in the same gods. Its structure was more loose than the original kingdom of Babylon, and there were dozens of kingdoms of various sizes. The so-called king's actual status was equivalent to a city lord of a city-state, but he enjoyed the authority of a king in this city-state. Some kingdoms were even equivalent to the size of an ordinary town, and the ruler of a territory the size of a village called himself a king. Many kings did not have a lineage, and the nobles or generals who held great military power took turns to ascend the throne in history, and the throne changed many times. Such rulers were also called usurpers by the sages. The entire kingdom of Hilton currently did not have a unified monarch, and it adopted a form similar to a city-state parliament to discuss the important affairs of the kingdom, forming a practical co-rule. But this form of co-rule was very loose, and internal conflicts often broke out. Among these large and small kingdoms, there was a kingdom with a very strong military force called Gabados, and Leone was the current king of Gabados. The kingdom of Gabados implemented a very cruel militaristic policy. The citizens of Gabados were born to fight, and weak or not strong enough babies were even abandoned at birth. They received harsh military training from an early age, and they had to become official soldiers at the age of 20. They stayed in the army until the age of 30, before they could get married. After marriage, they had to participate in military training every day until the age of 60, but most soldiers did not have the chance to live to 60. On the continent, official soldiers were at least first-level warriors who had awakened the power of their bloodline. That was to say, the adult male citizens of Gabados, except for a few mages, were all warriors who practiced body arts. What would happen if someone failed to become a warrior? Then he would be eliminated before the age of 20, and the so-called elimination meant that he died in cruel selection or cruel training. The men of Gabados did not produce, and all the people of Gabados firmly believed that they had the noblest bloodline. They only had one profession, and that was to fight and live by conquering the enslaved. Such a system was even harsher than the state policy implemented by Emperor Hinnock, but they also once formed a strong military force, and with a small population, they conquered and ruled a large surrounding territory. With tribes, Amon seemed to have not been long since the fusion of the Anunnaki and Ennead, but more than 10 years had passed in the human world. Darius ascended the throne to quell the civil strife, and Assyria and Babylon were destroyed one after another. He followed the expedition route of Cyrus, from Hittite to the west, crossed the promontory, destroyed Tuath, established a new province, and attacked the kingdom of Hilton from both the sea and land. Darius also sent envoys to see the cities of Dahidan asking them to surrender, and many small kingdoms were ready to surrender. But the most powerful and wealthiest city-state of the entire kingdom of Hilton called on all the city-states to unite to resist the invasion of Pots. Many of the city-states of the kingdom of Hilton were distributed along the coastline and larger islands, and maritime trade was the backbone of their economy. Therefore, the kingdom of Hilton organized a powerful navy and defeated Pots in a naval battle. Pots incorporated the navy and warships of Hittite, and requisitioned the warriors of the original Babylon navy. Attacking from the sea did not achieve the desired results, so Darius launched an army by land, personally leading a team of 10,000 people. At this time, the various kingdoms of Hilton hoped that the Gebedos could go to war, as they were the most powerful land force of Hilton. In the previous naval battle, the Gebedos did not participate in the war. The reason why the Gebedos did not participate in the war was very simple. They did not produce, trade, and only lived by conquering and enslaving the conquered. Although they had a strong military force, they did not care much about other things. The Gebedos nobles opposed the expedition. In their opinion, as long as the army of Pots did not attack Gebedos, there was no need to worry about it. Although they killed the messenger sent by Darius, they were not interested in protecting the other city-states of the kingdom of Hilton. The Gebedos had always fought for their own conquest, and did not intend to participate in the allied forces of the kingdom of Hilton. Many of the Gebedos nobles thought that if the army of Pots attacked the kingdom of Hilton by land, they would still be very far from Gebedos, and the Pots would not be able to conquer Gebedos. The loss of the strength of the various city-states of Hilton was a good opportunity for Gebedos to carry out a new round of conquest and expansion. The decision was made by the elders of the Gebedos nobles, and they rejected the proposal to send an army to war. This was their usual thinking. But now Gebedos had a king Leone, and his thinking was obviously different. Without the support of the noble groups of the kingdom, he could not mobilize the army, but when the king went out, he had the right to bring his personal guards. So Leone claimed that he was guided by an oracle, and led 300 personal guards to the front line. The army of Hilton was stationed at a place called the Hot Springs Pass, which was a dangerous mountain pass. Other than Leone and his 300 personal guards, the allied forces of the various city-states of the kingdom of Hilton had a total of more than 7,000 people. Leone led the most elite 300 personal guards to guard the Hot Springs Pass, while the others covered the mountain pass from the flanks and coordinated the battle. According to the legend of the Hilton people, Darius launched an attack of 5 million troops. This was obviously impossible. The power of all the countries in the central continent combined at that time could not support such a large army, not to mention the organization and transportation of military supplies and logistics. There were also people who knew that this so-called history was just nonsense, so they changed the number to 500,000 or 200,000 soldiers. And the main force led by Darius was a 10,000-man army, and there were also the reserve troops in the new province to face the 7,000 soldiers of the kingdom of Hilton. The 10,000-man army believed that the main force of the battle was a cross-border expedition, and the huge amount of logistics, supplies, and reserve troops that Darius needed also exceeded 100,000 people. Darius had to attack from afar, and the kingdom of Hilton had a natural geographical advantage, so the battle situation was very disadvantageous to Pots. The dangerous Hot Springs Pass could not accommodate a large army on the battlefield, so they could only launch a forceful attack. The army of Pots was repeatedly beaten back by the kingdom of Hilton. Darius also saw Leone from afar on the battlefield, and the two of them revealed expressions that only they understood. Darius had seen him in a roadside tavern, and he knew what kind of opponent he had encountered this time. Since Marduk could cut off his incarnation and become the emperor of Pots in the human world, then Zeus could also come to the human world and become king of Gebedos. The Battle of Hot Springs Pass was not only a battle between the Pots Empire and the Kingdom of Hilton, but also a direct confrontation between the two kings of the Divine Kingdom. The army of Pots suffered a setback at Hot Springs Pass, and Marduk did not want to retreat in front of Zeus, so he mobilized the reserve troops of the Empire of Hilton to take turns to attack Hot Springs Pass. Although there were heavy casualties, the main purpose was to attract the attention of the Kingdom of Hilton and deplete their combat power, so that they could not spare troops to take care of the weak points of the overall defense line. In the dark, Darius mobilized the most elite forces of the 10,000-man army, climbed the precipice, bypassed the pass in front of them, and launched a sneak attack from the back of Hot Springs Pass. The Kingdom of Hilton was finally defeated, and Leone and his 300 personal guards were all killed. The army of Pots also paid a heavy price. After capturing Hot Springs Pass, they went straight to Yarn City, the most important city of the Kingdom of Hilton. And Leone's attack at Hot Springs Pass bought time for the cities. When the army of Pots arrived at Yarn City, all the people in the city had already evacuated, leaving only an empty city burning in flames. Chapter 299. Ammon, however, shook his head. The victory and defeat between the gods cannot be determined by this. Obviously, that Leone was made of flesh and blood, just an identity that Zeus used when he came to the human world. Leone's death is not necessarily Zeus's failure. As long as he achieved the result he wanted as Leone, then it would be equivalent to completing a certain kind of verification. Morin asked again, so what goal did Zeus achieve? Ammon mused. He involved Gabedos in the war, and even the king was killed on the front lines, becoming the hero of the whole of Khiton. The kingdom of Khiton was truly united in this war, changing the previous loose situation of each doing their own thing. If another wise monarch could take advantage of this opportunity, he could form a truly powerful kingdom and unify the divine realm of Olympus. There is a limit to the expansion of a kingdom on earth, and the Potsdam Empire has reached its limit, but it gave Zeus a chance. It seems that I really need to travel to the human world, and some insights can only be truly experienced by being there. Morin was a little puzzled. I still don't quite understand. What is the relationship between Darius and Marduk? And what is the relationship between that King Leone of Gabedos and Zeus? Ammon replied. I know about Darius's situation. He is the incarnation of Marduk's severed fruit, born, grown, and achieved like a normal person. But Marduk himself is still in the divine realm he created. And if he descends to the human world, he will merge with the identity of Darius. But I am not too clear about Leone's situation. Zeus can also come to the human world in person, and become King Gabedos in a new way, that is, as a mortal existence. When this mortal dies, or achieves transcendence and eternal life, Zeus will return to the divine realm of Olympus, perhaps to verify what he sought. I think this situation should be called the incarnation of past lives. Morin said thoughtfully. Then if Zeus is not in heaven, he is in the human world as Leone? Ammon thought for a moment before explaining. That may not be true, he may still be in heaven, but he has severed such an identity, which is the same as Darius that Marduk severed. Only those who have transcended the realm of the god of creation can truly possess these mysterious methods. Morin blinked again and said, Ammon, shouldn't you also have this kind of method? Ammon nodded. Yes, theoretically, I should have such a method. It just depends on whether I have the desire, and what I want to prove. Morin grabbed Ammon's arm and shook it. Then you should do the same. Cut off an incarnation of the fruit of proof or the incarnation of the world of experience to go to the human world, while you, as the Lord of Heaven, stay here. Ammon smiled and shook his head. No, I'm going there myself. I'm going alone. You should know that I haven't fully understood the profoundness of such a method, so I can't easily try it. It's also a kind of test in the human world. Morin still grabbed Ammon's arm and refused to let go. You have just fused the Anunnaki and the Ennead, and have verified your current realm. But there are many mysteries that you have yet to understand. Take some time to comprehend them, and watch what happens in the human world. It's not too late to go when there's a suitable opportunity, or when your soul is truly touched. This is the way gods should act, and they don't care about that little time. Ammon waved his hand, and a field of delicate roses appeared beside him. He took Morin's arm and sat down in the middle of the flowers. What you said makes sense, then I'll stay here with you. The gods really don't care about that little time. Amon accompanied Murin in heaven, and they watched the war between the Boz Empire and the Kingdom of Hilton. The fighting between the armies had nothing to do with anything in heaven, but Amon had been thinking silently. Murin smiled and said to him, "My God, let me see if your prophecy can be fulfilled, if Zeus has achieved his goal." After the death of King Leonid of Gabados, the War of Hippo entered a real climax. The entire Kingdom of Hilton had a total of more than 200 cities of various sizes, and the lords of these cities called themselves king. The Boz Empire conquered more than half of them, including the important city of Macedon in the north. But the two most important cities, Gabados and Yaran, did not yield to the Boz people. They formed a military and political alliance and joined forces with the rest of the cities to wage a continuous war against the Boz invaders. At the beginning, the Kingdom of Hilton was defensive in the land war, but in the sea war, they were on the offensive. Their navy was familiar with the climate and hydrology of this area, and the priests went with the warships to pray to Poseidon for blessings. Darius defeated the Boz navy many times and cut off the sea supply line of the Boz army, but in the end, he did not completely conquer the Kingdom of Hilton. The expansion of the Boz Empire reached its limit in the era of Darius. In addition to the original Boz territory, a total of 20 new provinces were established in the occupied areas, and the farthest province was located in the east of the Kingdom of Hilton. From the Boz territory to the Kingdom of Hilton, one had to cross the borders of the former Assur and Babylon, cross the Saya Desert, pass through the borders of the former Hittite kingdom, cross the straits, and pass through the conquered Kingdom of Turkic. One could imagine how vast its territory was. In its vast territory, there were all kinds of tribes living, and they believed in all kinds of gods. The economy and culture of the different regions were very different, and people even spoke many different languages. When the expansion of the conquest was blocked, and the foreign war entered a stalemate, such a long expedition was a great test for the Boz Empire's logistical supplies. The consumption of war was not conducive to the consolidation of the kingdom's political power, so the War of Hippo became a turning point. At this time, there was also an unforeseen event at the border of the empire. Igut, which was ruled by Rodrik, took the opportunity to declare independence from the Boz Empire, and no longer pay taxes to the Boz Empire. Rodrik saw that the Boz Empire had fallen into a stalemate in the War of Hippo, and that its expansion had reached its limit. He made this decision, and at the same time he made military preparations. He believed that the current Boz Empire did not have the ability to launch a large-scale expedition on both fronts, and in the name of Ammonius' oracle, he issued a call to the people of the country. Did Ammon send an oracle? Yes, he did. Rodrik prayed in Ammonius' temple, asking for guidance from the gods. Ammon's voice said, "I can tell you about the current situation in the Boz Empire. If you want to achieve your goal, now is the best time. As for whether or not you can achieve your goal, you and the people of the Boz Empire have to work hard. Just do as I say." Igut was the first vassal state to declare independence from the Boz Empire. So of course, the Boz Empire sent troops to punish them. After a bitter battle at the Red Sea, the Boz army did not win, and at this time Darius died. Murin, who was in heaven, said to Ammon in puzzlement, "How did Darius die?" Ammon smiled bitterly. "Leonid will die, and of course Darius will die as well. Their identities are mortals, flesh and blood. Zeus and Marduk came to the human world as incarnations to become monarchs, not practitioners. What they wanted to prove was not the path of transcendence and immortality. I think Marduk saw it more clearly than I did. The expansion of the Boz Empire had reached its limit, marked by the defeat in the Greco-Persian War, and the rebellion of Igut. He came to the human world and obtained the knowledge he wanted to prove, so I think his goal should have been achieved." Murin asked again, "Ammon, in terms of your achievements, what goal did Marduk achieve, and what achievements did he prove?" Ammon narrowed his eyes and said slowly, "Look at the Boz Empire. Darius is the most outstanding monarch in the history of the continent, and he accomplished what all the previous monarchs dreamed of doing but could not do. In my personal experience, Lazarus II, Emperor Sennac, and others all had such ambitions, but they could not achieve them, but Darius did. There was a trace of confusion in Murin's eyes. You once explained to me the achievements of the gods of creation, that is the end of human desires, and that it can only be achieved by transcending the human world. And Marduk has surpassed the gods of creation. What did he prove in the human world? And what did you see? Amon replied thoughtfully. I saw the difference between the divine realm he created and the heavenly realm I created. Marduk merged the divine realm of the Anunnaki divine clan, but allowed the existence of different gods, real and fake, while Darius conquered almost all the kingdoms on the continent, forming a unified great empire. This is a kind of fusion, a kind of innovation, and also a revelation to the latecomers, and even influenced and changed the world. If anyone on the continent wants to build such a kingdom and manage such a large area and so many tribes, they will have to learn from Darius' approach. Murin nodded and praised. Marduk came to the human world as Darius, gathered the essence of traditional imperial techniques, and built such an empire. No predecessor on the continent had any experience, so he could only summarize and create on his own. He took the provincial system of Cyrus to the extreme to manage the huge territory, and learned from the practice of Emperor Cynic of Assur to organize the military, unify taxes and weights, so that so many tribes of all kinds could be integrated into one kingdom. Amon continued. This is a fusion of seeking common ground while reserving differences, and Marduk himself also had many identities. The people of Boz worshipped the faith of fire as the state religion and promoted it everywhere, but allowed the original beliefs of the gods to be retained everywhere. The divine realm that Marduk opened up in the immortal eternity is already very clear. It can accommodate all kinds of gods, and it can also allow all kinds of creators to create their own world in his divine realm. You can say that it is rich and colorful, but it can also be said that it is full of demons and devils. This is what he wanted to prove, and his goal has been achieved, so the identity of Darius is no longer important. Murin asked with interest. It seems that you have also understood this kind of verification and understand his divine realm. So can you also take a look for yourself? Just like when you first entered the divine realm of Eru. Amon smiled. Yes, since I have understood it, of course I can enter that world. Do you want me to take a look? Murin showed a very curious look. Will it be dangerous? Amon smiled and shook his head. Existences like Marduk and I will not directly take action unless we have no other choice. Just like Anu or Ungar back then, no one can afford to fall, and not falling is also a kind of promise. Murin asked again, how long will it take? Amon replied, I'll be back soon. Murin patted Amon on the back and said, then you should go take a look. I'm also very curious about what his divine realm looks like. Amon stood up and said, okay, I'll go. With that, he stepped into the inexplicable void and disappeared into the immortal eternity. Murin's eyes widened, and before she could speak, she saw Amon take a step back from the immortal eternity, with a strange look in his eyes. Murin said in surprise, what's wrong, you didn't go? Amon shook his head with a wry smile and said, no, I'm already back. Murin was stunned, so fast. Amon explained, yes, it's that fast. As soon as I entered that world, I alarmed Marduk, and I didn't want to say anything more to him, so I turned around and came back. Murin grabbed Amon's arm and asked, what does his divine realm look like, and what is its name? Amon did not speak, and a huge amount of information was imprinted into Murin's soul, and the angel who had transcended eternal life almost lost her footing, and her body swayed as she was hugged by Amon. Many mysteries could not be described, so Amon directly imprinted his own experience into Murin's soul, as if Murin had witnessed it herself, and then passed through the immortal eternity and entered a land of mountains and rivers, which could be said to be colorful and chaotic. Using detection magic to the limit, as far as the eye could see, there were beautiful prairies full of wild flowers, dense jungles overflowing with miasma, and deep ravines filled with gloom, as if countless worlds were layered together. The place where he stood was a dirt slope, surrounded by no grass, and in front of him was a huge stone tablet with words on it. This stone tablet and words could not have appeared in the mortal world, and it was not engraved with any kind of language, but changed according to the perception of the viewer. If an illiterate god came here and saw this tablet, he would naturally be able to sense a kind of information and understand what was written on the tablet. What Amon saw was similar to the divine text on the scroll of destiny, and the information he felt explained the origin of this world. The words on the tablet that Amon saw were the world of freedom, and the small inscription below was Wuxia. But with Muren's perception, the words she saw in the information were the world of the Creator, and the small inscription below was Marduk. The Creator was an achievement that allowed one to create a world that belonged only to oneself in the immortal eternity. Marduk already had the achievement of the Creator long before he left the Anunnaki divine clan, but he did not attach himself to the divine kingdom to create his own world, and he used another identity to prove another realm, the world of freedom. The difference between the Creator and the world of freedom may only be understood by the gods, but in terms of realm, it was similar. However, the world of freedom was also broader than the Creator. By killing Enlil, Marduk achieved an achievement that surpassed the god of creation, broke away from the Anunnaki divine clan, and also proved that the world of freedom was a higher realm, and he created the world of freedom in the immortal eternity. According to Muren's understanding, this divine kingdom could accommodate all kinds of realms created by the Creator, so the words that Muren saw were written in the Anunnaki language, the world of the Creator. So what was so brilliant about this divine kingdom compared to the divine kingdom of the God of creation? The first and most important point was that Wuxia himself could leave as he pleased, unlike the God of creation who had to stay in the divine kingdom. The so-called state of Mahasvara was actually different from the achievement of Creator. In Muren's understanding, gods who had transcended eternal life fell into their own understanding of the world of their souls. Everything they experienced and witnessed was based on their selfishness. They could not accommodate the world outside of their own hearts. Therefore, no matter how powerful their magic power was or how high their knowledge was, the world they created could not be opened. If the gods who sought this realm continued to see through it, there were still various possibilities. Perhaps they would have higher achievements, or perhaps they would fall. Wuxia, on the other hand, had broken through to a higher realm. His divine kingdom was a world that could accommodate all kinds of world of freedom, and it also received all the transcended eternal beings who were willing to come here. The world that Wuxia opened was also closed and could not be shared with the gods, but after he achieved higher achievements, he extended the spiritual world of his own realm, and created a world of mountains and rivers. Those gods who were unwilling to abide by the vows of the various divine clans, and only pursued their own desires could come here. If they could achieve the world of freedom similar to the Creator, they could also rely on Wuxia's divine kingdom to open their own world. Such gods were also called the Demon of Freedom, and Wuxia was called the Demon King. This divine kingdom could be said to be full of demons, and there were all kinds of gods. They did not have a unified guidance in the human world, and some did not leave any guidance at all. The master of this divine kingdom was Wuxia, but as long as those who received guidance did not infringe on Wuxia's interests, Wuxia could not be bothered to care about them. What Wuxia wanted was the soul imprint and cultivation knowledge that the Demon of Freedom had integrated into this world. With such a huge amount of information imprinted in her soul, Muren took a while to regain her senses. She asked in surprise, "Why don't I see any gods in this divine kingdom?" Amon smiled and explained, "This world has just been created not long ago, and there are not many gods who have entered there." Muren asked again, "I also don't see any worlds created by the Creator of Freedom." Amon explained again, "Those gods cannot be called Creator completely, they should be called World of Freedom, but their achievements are similar to the Creator. You cannot see those worlds, and only the Demon of Freedom can enjoy them. The result of my observation is that the world of freedom attached to Wuxia's divine kingdom is small. There are not many worlds yet, and most of the gods who enter there do not have such achievements." Muren grabbed Amon's arm and said, "You mean that Marduk's divine kingdom can accommodate all kinds of creator worlds, but those worlds cannot be unfolded. From this point of view, Marduk is not as good as you. Those Demon of Freedom are not as good as the archangels like Ea in heaven." Amon smiled and shook his head. "You can't say that. Marduk's vow is like this. The gods who enter the world of freedom do not need to believe in Marduk, nor do they need to be Marduk's disciples on earth. They just have the same selfish beliefs, so Marduk's divine kingdom is like that. This is also an achievement that amazes me, but it is not what I seek. P.S. Some readers like to compare the contents of this book with world history to research. As far as the subject matter is concerned, the content of Dubhi has actually flattened nearly 2,000 years of mythological history and civilization history, and compressed it into a few decades. It takes place in the background of a foreign land. Historical characters and their experiences converge in this background, passing through and condensing time and space. This is something that needs to be specially stated. Chapter 300. Morin finally understood what kind of divine kingdom it was, and covered her mouth. Marduk can really imagine that he created such a divine kingdom. The more gods attached to the divine kingdom, the broader his knowledge, and in theory, it is endless. Amon nodded and said, "Yes, he sought this oath in the human world, and broke through the limits of this oath in the divine kingdom. I also went through a similar process, but the oath was different, so I created my own divine kingdom." Amon and Murin discussed what kind of divine kingdom Marduk had created in heaven, while the affairs of the human world continued. Darius died and his son Xerxes ascended the throne, and the Empire of Boz and the United Kingdom of Hellas were still in a state of continuous war. In the various city-states that had been conquered by Boz, resistance activities also rose and fell, and the Empire of Boz turned from offensive to defensive. Marduk had already confirmed the state he was pursuing, and what happened next had nothing to do with him. Even the son of Darius, the new emperor of Boz, Xerxes, did not know that the great god of light Mazda that the people of Boz worshipped was another identity of Marduk. As the expansion of the Empire of Boz came to an end, its national policies also began to change, and its internal governance became increasingly harsh. Finally, one day, Xerxes ordered the burning of the Divine Gate in Babylon City and the demolition of Marduk's shrine, only allowing the people to worship the great god of light Mazda, and the holy fire of light that the Bozians believed in. Murin watched this scene unfold and secretly laughed in heaven, leaning in Amon's arms and shaking with laughter. Darius' son ordering the burning of Marduk's shrine was indeed absurd and funny in the eyes of the gods. But as she laughed and laughed, Murin's expression suddenly changed to anger, and she stood up and said, "Amon, your people actually demolished our shrine." Amon also stood up and patted him on the shoulder. "Why are you angry? You were laughing at Marduk just now, but we will also suffer the same injustice that he suffered." Murin asked, "Would you be happy?" Amon sighed. "It doesn't matter if I'm happy or not. I'm just a little emotional that Marduk's prophecy back then has been confirmed. Sure enough, it was my people who demolished my shrine without letting Marduk do it, and it was not the Pot's army who did it. Amon was the god of Igut, so Roderick would not order for his temple to be demolished. The temple that was demolished was the one in Talon, which was Amon's earliest temple. It was Amon who guided his disciples to build the city of Shilling. The statue of him hugging Murin had been standing on the altar, accepting sacrifices from the people. It had become a symbol of faith. How could it be torn down by the people of Shilling? This was the vicissitudes of life. Marduk once said to Amon, "Even if my believers occupy the entire central continent of today, I will not interfere with the faith of Sellenberg. But I want to remind you of one thing. People believe in gods not because they are born to believe, but because they can get spiritual comfort from the gods, or fulfill their desires in the name of the gods. Things change, people's hearts change, and the descendants of Sellenberg will also make different choices, and when that time comes, I'm afraid you will watch your statue fall." When Marduk said this, he not only used the identity of Marduk, but also told Amon that he had another name, Poxon, which meant that no matter which identity he gave the oracle or guidance, it would not interfere with the faith of Sellenberg, and the gods would naturally keep their promises. The Pot's empire successively destroyed Elam, Hittite, Assyria, Babylon, and other countries, and the plains of Duk were naturally included in the vast territory of Pots. The city of Sellenberg occupied the northern part of the plains of Duk, while the southern part was occupied by the cities of Meso and Budamia, which were occupied by Hittite. After the fall of Hittite, Pots merged Meso, Budamia, Saya, and several nearby city-states together to establish the province of Saya. The status of Selenburg had always been very special. It had always been independent, but it had never declared independence in name, and on the surface it was subordinate to the Hittite kingdom and Saya. When the Hittite kingdom was annexed by Pots, it was subordinate to the newly established province of Saya. The territory controlled by Selenburg was completely surrounded by the Pots Empire, and trade had to be conducted with the Pots Empire. There was no other choice. The resources produced in Selenburg could only be sold to the provinces of the Pots Empire, and the products needed by Selenburg also had to be exchanged with the surrounding provinces and pay taxes set by the Pots Empire. Apart from the fact that the Pots Empire did not assign a capital to Selenburg, the status of Selenburg was equivalent to a relatively large city-state in the Pots Empire, and it could not be separated from the Pots Empire. After George and Link retired to the Garden of Eden, and Aesop and Joshua grew old, when Ammon left Selenburg, the main governors of Selenburg were Tich and Usser. The two of them were very clear about the situation of Selenburg, and the main policy was to maintain the status quo. When Ammon left Duk and was banished to the mountains, he was only 14 years old, and when he last appeared in front of the people of Selenburg, he was only in his 20s. Counting the years in the human world, he should be 58 years old now. Many years have passed, and earth-shaking changes have taken place on the heaven's pivot continent. Most of the Dushians were buried in the Great Flood in the early years. Among the 60 survivors, the youngest was David Solomon, followed by Ammon, and then Moses. Moses was 2 years older than Ammon, and David Solomon was 8 years younger than Ammon. When David was 6 years old, his father took him out of Dudong for the first time to see the world in Saya. He happened to escape the Great Flood, and became the youngest survivor. After Ammon left Selenburg, Tich and Usser also grew old, and David Solomon became the new ruler of Selenburg. Madanzo once guided David Solomon to the power of the origin. The child was very smart. He achieved the 6th level before the age of 20, but it took him many years to continue to advance. It was only when he became the governor of Selenburg at the age of 40 that he broke through to the 7th level. David Solomon also inherited the blood essence of the Dushians that had been accumulated for thousands of years, and the power of the origin guided by Madanzo. He was very strong and very smart, but some things were not clear. People with better aptitude or smarter aptitude were more likely to understand the various mysteries of cultivation, but one could not only rely on these to achieve the highest level. Otherwise, there would not be so few people in the world who could achieve the highest level. In his youth, David performed better than Ammon in many aspects, but in the world, there were almost countless people who were superior to Ammon in many aspects. In contrast, it was already quite remarkable that David was able to break through to the highest level of the origin, and become the leader of Selenburg. In the later period of Tich and Usser's rule, Selenburg actually entered the era of judges. The Dushians gradually became the rulers of Selenburg, and took control of the power and wealth of the city. Of the 12 judges guided by Moses, 3 died in battle, 3 later entered the Garden of Eden, and the rest grew old in Selenburg. These judges were very old and authoritative. They guided the Dushians to offer sacrifices to Allah, and played an increasingly important role in the management of the city until David grew up. The new generation of Dushians also began to flourish. The descendants were reluctant to mention the Dushians who represented the sinners. They only claimed to be the people of Selenburg who made a pact with Allah, and were saved and blessed by the gods. With the support of the older generation of judges, Solomon himself was also extremely talented. Not only did he establish absolute authority among the people of Quelling, but he also controlled the entire city of Quelling. Bingku, who the people of Quelling believed in, gradually replaced the position of the original god Ammon. This result was somewhat surprising, but from another perspective, it was also inevitable. Back then there were only a few dozen survivors of the Dushians, but when they came to Selenburg, there were already thousands of residents in the city. It seemed inconspicuous, but they enjoyed the most fertile land, inherited the minds of their clansmen, and made important contributions in the war to protect the city. The surviving generation of Dishans could be said to be extraordinary. They had gone through many hardships and finally, when they were freed from the bitter fate they had endured for generations, they no longer had to do the hard work of mining. They did very well in running farms, trading and lending businesses, not only because they had capital and prestige, but also because they had mastered knowledge and resources. Strength and wisdom were also the wealth left by their ancestors, making them the richest people in Sellenberg. Girls were willing to marry the Dishans. They had superior conditions, and were able to provide their descendants with the best education and living environment. They could even master several languages and scripts on the continent. Gradually, their population prospered. After 2 generations of reproduction, the number of people in this branch exceeded 1,000. The rest of the people in Sellenberg were mainly made up of several groups: cavemen or highland giants who moved from the deep mountains, wandering explorers and rogue proletarians from the surrounding countries, bankrupt craftsmen, and landless farmers. These people could not be compared to the Dishans in any aspect. Not to mention, the vast majority of them were illiterate. The Dishans, who controlled wealth and knowledge, also had the power to offer sacrifices to the gods in the city, representing the will of the gods. People's faith did not come out of thin air. It would inevitably be affected by the environment. The Dishans controlled economic and political resources, so naturally, they controlled the social resources to spread their faith. The generation of people who summoned Ammonius on the battlefield in the early years gradually passed away, and the new generation gradually grew up. They did not have the experience of their fathers, and they lived in a new environment. More and more people followed the Dishans and believed in Allah. Just as the Pot's empire continued to expand and spread the holy flame of light all over the continent, the worship of Allah had also silently penetrated deep into the hearts of the people of Lung, gradually becoming the mainstream faith of the city. But the main shrine of the city was still the Temple of Ammonius. It stood in the center of the city square, looking tall and magnificent. But the statue of Ammon holding Murin on the altar now looked a little frivolous and not solemn enough. There was also an Allah shrine in Sellenberg, but it was built in the place where the Dishans first lived. It was very small and inconspicuous, but the number of sacrifices received became more and more grand. The new generation of rulers of the city gradually had the idea of replacing the original temple of Ammonius with the main shrine of Allah. When the older generation was still alive, this idea was only in their hearts, but when the new generation of Dishans represented by David Solomon came to power, this desire became stronger and stronger, because the status of Allah also symbolized their status. Before Joshua died, Sung Lin gave David Solomon a Bible, which recorded the experiences and sufferings of the Dishans, the process of returning home from the distant Igut under the guidance of Allah, and also collected the oracles, miracles, hymns, and various legends of Allah. It was a history that carried the beliefs of the Dishans, and recorded the agreement between the gods and the people. The Dishans were proud of it. David Solomon was also a witness of this history. He could naturally see the traces of modification and exaggeration in many of the legends, and could more or less guess the relationship between Ammonius and Allah. But the gods did not make it clear, and David Solomon would not make it clear either. On the other hand, the belief in Allah was not a personal matter of David, but the wish and belief of the whole people. It was not only related to spiritual sustenance, but also determined the interests and status of the people in the secular world. Since David was the leader of the people, his actions must represent this wish and belief. Any successful change needed the right time to follow a seemingly unstoppable trend. The first opportunity finally appeared, and that was a coup in the Igut. Tutankhamun succeeded the throne. They worshipped Ammon as the main god of the kingdom of Igut. The Dishans hated the people of Igut because in their Bible, their ancestors had been enslaved by the people of Igut, and they were only able to return home with the guidance of Allah. It was Allah's miracles that allowed them to defeat the evil gods of Igut. Now that Ammon had become the main god of Igut, they naturally did not want to see the city-state they controlled still offer sacrifices to the gods of Igut, as if it was constantly awakening some shameful memory. David Solomon took the opportunity to order the sacrifice of Allah to become the official ceremony of the city-state, replacing the original sacrifice of Ammonius. This order was opposed by a few people, but it was passed with the support and acquiescence of the majority. This was because David did not demolish the hall of Ammonius, nor did he forbid the people from offering sacrifices to Ammonius. He only changed the official target of the sacrifice. Although the Dushians were now thriving, they were still a minority in the total population of Dushians, but they were able to control the entire city-state. They implemented a kind of meritocracy that seemed fair and reasonable, but through the control of economic and political resources, they had the right to speak in public opinion and coerce the will of the majority. The people often thought that they had made their own choices, but in fact, the results they could choose were just the results that others had prepared for them. This was the core of this kind of meritocracy. It could be reflected in various forms on the surface, and it would have a wide influence in later generations. The second opportunity that the Dushians waited for was when the expansion of the Potsdam Empire suffered a setback, and the power of the country was at a turning point from prosperity to decline. The War of Hippo gradually became passive, and Igat took the opportunity to leave. When the control of the empire within the empire declined, Xerxes ordered the demolition of the gates of the gods and the Marduk temple in Babylon city. David took the opportunity to order the demolition of the Hall of Ammonius, and to build a more magnificent Hall of Allah on the original site of the temple square. It had been 10 years since the last official sacrifice reform. With these 10 years of foreshadowing, there was very little resistance when it came to real action. There were two main reasons for David Solomon to demolish the Hall of Ammonius. First, the god that the city was officially sacrificing was Allah, so the Hall of Allah should become the main shrine. Second, the shrines of the original Anunnaki had been demolished throughout the Potsdam Empire. Assyria, Babylon, Hittite, and other countries that believed in the Anunnaki gods were long gone. Ammon standing on the altar of the main shrine with the statue of Murin in his arms seemed frivolous and contrary to the sacred dignity of the gods. But David Solomon still had a trick up his sleeve. He only replaced the original Ammon with Allah as the main god of the city, and demolished the original statue, but did not prohibit the people from believing in Ammon. Those who believed in Ammon could privately fund the construction of shrines for Ammon in other places, which had nothing to do with the officials of the city, and there would be no ceremony. In fact, none of this mattered. The people of Talung had already controlled the best land in Talung, and controlled the economic, political, and cultural resources. Believing in Ammon was already a non-mainstream nostalgia, and Allah, who had made a pact with the people of Talung, was the only god that the city believed in. In the minds of the people of Talung, Ammon gradually became a legendary hero, a mythical figure of the foreign races. Allah was another identity of Ammon, and this made no difference to the gods. Just like when Xerxes ordered the demolition of the temple of Marduk to be dedicated to Mazda, the god of light, Marduk did not care. In recent decades, the continent had undergone frequent changes, and the gods that many kingdoms believed in had also changed frequently. This was partly due to the guidance of the gods, but more importantly, it was determined by the situation on earth. When the main shrine of Ammon was demolished in the city of Talung, Marduk's prophecy finally came true. Ammon could only sigh with emotion. Instead, he persuaded Murin to take a look at the shrine of Marduk, and she suffered the same fate. Murin was only angry for a moment, and then she said with annoyance and amusement, "I used to be the guardian of the town of Duk, but the town of Duk was destroyed by the flood. I hoped that you could guide my people to restore my divine realm, and you fulfilled your promise. But now, it is your people who have demolished the shrine of you and me. As a god, you should have become very calm in the long history." Chapter 301. 282. The gods leave the city of Salem. Murin asked, "If the people of Salem oppress the believers of Ammonius in the name of Allah, or vice versa, and the believers of Ammonius harm the believers of Allah in the same name, will your kingdom still guide them?" Ammon replied without batting an eyelid, "I'm ready. Hell will be waiting for them. Whether it is oppression or harm, it is a sin on earth no matter in whose name it is, and the desires of the world will not be elevated by the name of the gods, let alone be redeemed. Murin asked again. What about David Solomon? Will he also go to hell? Aman shook his head. I can't decide for him until the last moment comes. It depends on how his own soul faces the test. I have no doubt about his devotion to my faith, and he needs to receive guidance from the one and only God in some form to strengthen his faith. Since he controls the city of Salem, I do not blame him for using the shrine of Allah to represent His Highness Ammonius. Back then he was just a young slave, and now he has great power, controls the city that produces the most parangons on the continent, and will become an excellent king. The faith and sacrifices of the people to Allah will be carried forward in his hands, and this is not a sin. As Allah, I have given him everything that I can guide him, and if he does not transcend in the end, it will only depend on his soul in this life search. And the descendants of David may turn this firm belief into a selfish desire, which will instead lead to a sin on earth. Murin, the descendants of David, aren't they still your people? Aman nodded helplessly. Yes, they are still the descendants of the people who made a pact with Allah, and their ancestors were also people of Duk. You were once the patron saint of Duk. And didn't you also witness the destruction of Duk? It has nothing to do with them being the sinners of the gods, or the people of the gods. Murin was also smiling bitterly. At this moment Aman suddenly frowned. You advised me not to rush to the human world. I should wait for the right opportunity, the time when my soul is truly touched. The time has finally come. I heard someone calling me, asking me to leave Salem and return to his distant hometown. He is old and has given his whole life to Salem. Murin seemed to have heard something as well. She nodded and said, Is it Aesop? You should go and meet him in the human world. Aman said thoughtfully, No, I'm not just going to see him. I'm going to be his attendant and personally drive him back to his hometown. His hometown is in the Hilton United Kingdom, which is where I want to go. Aesop was almost 80 years old this year. He was not a supreme warrior or a supreme mage, and it was quite rare for him to live to this age. Those who lived to this age were already respected, not to mention that Aesop himself had been respected for many years. He was a slave Aman rescued in the Saya Desert in his early years, and his master was the wealthy merchant Sayo of Montefiore. Later, Aman bought Aesop from Sayo and gave him the status of a freedman. The origin of Aesop's status as a freedman could be traced back to when Roddick went to Duk in search of the god's tear, and that was also the first time Aman and Maria met. At that time, Roddick gave Mayor Dusty a gift. It was a certificate of his identity as a freedman of Igut, signed by himself. In order to thank him for getting the god's tear in Duk and for the iron smuggling business between him and Mayor Dusty, Roddick gave him a large number of valuable gifts. This certificate of identity was probably the most special of them all. At that time, the miners of Duk were not allowed to leave without permission. If someone was convicted and wanted to escape, he could take this certificate to Igut and live a new life. When Aman was banished to the mountains, Crazy Ol and Mayor Dusty came to see him off. Mayor Dusty gave the certificate to Aman. Aman did not use it himself. After he entered Igut, he became a supreme general with the help of Maria, but he gave the certificate to the slave Aesop. Aesop was freed, but his name was still Aesop, and if nothing happened later, he might have spent his life in Igut as a freedman or returned to his hometown. Later, Aman ordered Madanzo to bring Aesop to the plains of Duk, and Aesop became the first governor of Salem after the official establishment of the city, and his experience was no longer a secret. From slave to governor, it was a miracle, just like the appearance of the city of Salem on the plains of Duk, where there was nothing. It symbolized the dreams and wishes of many people, attracting more and more people to the city of Salem, and they were the first generation of citizens of Salem. After Aman's departure, Aesop gradually stopped managing the city, and devoted most of his energy to sorting out and collecting legends about the city of Salem and Ammonius. His good friend Joshua was also engaged in the same work, and the two of them each wrote a Bible, describing the same God. When Aesop grew old, Usser and Titsho also grew old, and Salem entered the era of the judges, and when David Solomon came to power, it was already the era of the Silurians. Although he had never heard Ammonius say it explicitly, Aesop also guessed that Allah was Aman's other identity, So in the scriptures he compiled, he did not write the name Ammon, but referred to him as God. Aesop was highly respected in the city of Salem, and David Solomon respected him very much. Aesop lived in a luxurious mansion and enjoyed high courtesy, and although he did not agree with David Solomon's decision to demolish the temple of Ammonius, David Solomon did not change his attitude towards him because of it. But David's respect for Aesop was one thing, and what he wanted to do was another, and he would not demolish the temple of Ammonius out of respect for Aesop. On the day that the main shrine of Ammon in Salem was demolished, Aesop stood in front of the window and looked in the direction of the city's square, calling out to Ammon in his heart, "My God, the only God, whether your name is Ammon or Allah, you will always be the one who saved my life in the desert, the one who gave me freedom in Igut, and the one who made my dream come true in the plains of Duk. I built this city with my own hands and countless people, and it was you who guided my people here, allowing them to return to their homeland that flowed with milk and honey. Now it has become a city of the Silurians, and the Allah that the Silurians believe in is still you, but for many of them, it is no longer you. Your temple is only a symbol of their desires. They destroyed your first temple because of this. You may sigh or smile as you watch all this happen in the kingdom of heaven. And I have witnessed it all with my life, and perhaps I have lived too long, and I thought I would rest here forever, but when I saw your statue being demolished, it awakened a wish that had been buried in my heart for many years. When I looked up at the stars as a slave, my soul was free, and I have been looking for my home, just as the Silurians are looking for theirs. Thanks to you, although I am not young, my body is still strong enough to travel far again. I want to return to my homeland before the end of my life, and take a look at my former homeland." The old mayor quietly shed tears as he prayed, and at this moment a voice said, "Aesop, are you leaving here?" Turning around, he saw that Madanzo had come behind him at some point. Aesop replied, "Yes, I want to return to my homeland. This wish has been buried in my heart for many years. I have stayed in the city of Salem all my life, and now I am no longer needed here. And the Bible I wrote has been sent to Igut for the descendants of Sio to pass on. Now it is time to fulfill my last wish, and while I can still drive the carriage, I will leave Salem for my hometown." Madanzo sighed and said, "If David Solomon is disrespectful to you, I can reprimand him. If you don't like living here, Ammonius doesn't mind taking you to the Garden of Eden. If you are going on a long journey, you can ask the city to send guards and servants to escort you." Aesop shook his head. "I will go back the way I came, and I don't want to disturb or bother anyone. My homeland is not the homeland of guards and servants. I will go back by myself. I only need a carriage and 2 horses." Madanzo dissuaded him. "How is that possible? Not to mention your age, I know you are still in good health, but the war between the United Kingdom of Hilton and the Boz Empire is not over yet, and it is too dangerous to travel like this." Aesop, with my age and life experience, this little bit of danger no longer matters. It is precisely because my homeland has been ravaged by the flames of war that I want to go back and see it even more. As long as I embark on this path, my wish will be fulfilled, and I don't mind if I can reach the end. I once promised Ammonius to build a new city on the plains of Duk, so when I leave, I will make a request to Ammon, hoping that he will hear my call and prayer. Aesop, you have fulfilled your promise, and I hope to help you fulfill your wish. Back then, it was Madanzo who escorted you to the plains of Duk, and as you said, you can go back the way you came. And now it is Madanzo who will send you back to your hometown. The first time I went to Igut, it was you who drove me, so this time I will drive for you." Another voice sounded, and Ammon appeared in front of Aesop. Aesop suddenly saw Ammon appear and hurriedly prostrated himself on the ground and saluted. "My God, thank you for allowing me to leave Salem to fulfill my last wish, but how dare I let you drive for me?" Ammon reached out to help him up and said, "I am going to the kingdom of Hilton as a mortal. I have my purpose, and I will send you back to your homeland on the way." Aesop grabbed Ammon's arm, tears welling up in his eyes again. "But you are my God. I used to think that I would never see you again before the end of my life." Ammon smiled and said, "This time, I am both escorting you and you are helping me. If I were just a mortal, I would never be able to thank you enough for what you have done for me. If you think of me as your God, then what I am saying now is an oracle. Please do not refuse." Aesop had not seen Ammon for decades, and at this moment when the god suddenly appeared in front of him and said such words, he was so excited that he grabbed Ammon's arm that his whole body trembled slightly. But Medanzo suddenly asked, "Aesop, have you ever yearned to fly in the sky?" Aesop was startled and replied, "When I was very young, I did have this yearning, hoping that my body could fly like my soul, but I can't fly." Medanzo smiled and said, "Then you can fulfill a wish. Ammonius and I can take you across the sea, avoiding places where there is conflict. I have long heard a lot about the kingdom of Hellas, and have always wanted to see it. Thank you for being my guide." Ammon also smiled and said, "Aesop should be the best guide on the continent. And this trip is not only to send Aesop back to his homeland, but I also want to meet the various sages who are famous on the continent. Mr. Aristotle is also there, and I hope to have a chance to meet him again." Ammon was also going to the kingdom of Hellas, and traveling as an ordinary person, he naturally needed a guide who was familiar with the local situation. Aesop hurriedly replied, "I would be happy to introduce you to everything about the kingdom of Hellas, but I have not been back for decades, and things have changed. I don't know if I am still familiar with it." Ammon replied, "The homeland is the homeland after all. I can accompany you to find traces of the past." The next day, Aesop packed his things and left with 2 horses and a very sturdy carriage. He did not bring any other servants or guards. Ammon drove the carriage himself, and Medanzo accompanied him in the carriage, and just like that they left the city of Salem. Aesop did not bid farewell to anyone in person, and only left a letter in the mansion. Heading west out of the city, Ammon's carriage ran very fast, but very nimbly avoided the pedestrians and carriages on the main road, almost as if it was flying close to the ground. But sitting in the carriage felt very stable without the slightest bumpiness. Ammon held a horsewhip in his hand. Tied to it was the whip rope that Enril had given him outside the town of Som. Enril had long fallen, and the Anunnaki divine clan no longer existed, but the horsewhip was still the horsewhip, and Ammon was now a coachman. After a night's rest on the road, they arrived at the entrance of the post road by the charcoal marsh at noon the next day. This post road was opened by Ammon himself back then, and Goliath mobilized the laborers of Saya to pave a trade road that could allow 2 carriages to pass side by side, and 3 posts were built along the way. Now, decades later, it has become a major transportation route between the plains of Duk and the province of Saya, and the road has become more spacious and flat. Originally a military defensive fortress was built here, and now it has developed into a large town, the size of a small city. There were 3 shrines here: the shrine of Allah built by the official order, the original shrine of Ammonius, and the shrine of the marsh goddess built with the funds of passing merchants. El-Mar was the legendary goddess of the marsh, the patron saint of this trade route, and the passing merchants were willing to offer sacrifices to her. Ammon rested his horse in front of the shrine of El-Mar, and deliberately went in to take a look. Many of the coachmen in the caravans were offering sacrifices to the goddess of the marsh, and they were all people who made a living on the trade route, so of course they hoped that the gods would protect them. Ammon did as the Romans do, and he also paid homage to the goddess of El-Mar with the coachman, and then he heard the statue let out a panicked voice. "My God! How can you pay homage to me?" Ammon replied quietly in his soul, "El-Mar, don't be surprised. My current identity is a coachman on earth, and I offer sacrifices to you like the other coachmen who pass through this post road. You have to thank Raphael. It was his casual joke that resulted in the legend of the goddess of the marsh in the mortal world." El-Mar, who was far away in the Garden of Eden, did not know what to say, and hurriedly spread her wings and flew out of the Garden of Eden, rushing to the sky above the charcoal marsh, ready to watch Ammon drive through the post road. El-Mar had not arrived yet, but another person had arrived first. Ammon was offering sacrifices in the shrine of El-Mar. Smoke and dust were rising from the direction of the city of Salem in the distance, and David Solomon came with his guards on horseback. Aesop was standing on the side of the road, and when David saw him, he hurriedly ordered his guards to stop, jumped off the horse and ran over quickly, bowed to Aesop and said, "Why did you leave without saying goodbye? If you have any dissatisfaction in the city of Salem, please let me know. If anyone offends you, I will order him to be punished immediately. Whatever you need, I will do my best to meet it. I only hope that you will live a comfortable and peaceful life in the city of Salem." Aesop replied, "Thank you for coming to see me off. I have only one wish, and that is to return to my homeland. Salem no longer needs me, and while I can still walk, I want to return to my hometown." David Solomon looked a little frightened. "But the city of Salem is your home, everyone respects you, and it was you who led my fathers to create this city. Now that you are old, why don't you live the rest of your life comfortably?" Aesop looked at David and replied calmly, "After Joshua's death, I had this idea, and now I have finally made up my mind. Joshua gave you the Bible he recorded, and I have also left my Bible, and I have no more regrets in the city of Salem. David, do you remember when you were a child? Why did you and your people walk out of the Igut and return to the plains of Duk? The me at this moment may be the you of the past." David wanted to say something more, but suddenly heard a voice in his soul. "Child, people have their own pursuits, and I will escort Aesop through the long journey. You don't have to say anything more." It was Madanzo speaking. David was taken aback. He had never seen the true face of the oracle who guided him to the power of origin, and he was not sure that the oracle was the Madanzo he had seen in the city of Salem in his early years, but hearing this voice naturally triggered the imprint in his soul. He hurriedly replied in his soul, "So it is you. If your will is to send Aesop away, of course I will not dissuade you, and I also wish him a safe journey, and everything will be as he wishes." Madanzo's voice asked again, "David, you have never forgotten my guidance, so may I ask you, what is the vow you want to fulfill in this life?" David Solomon's expression became respectful, and he replied solemnly in his soul, "To build the country of my people's dreams. This is the guidance of Allah, and the city of Salem will become the kingdom of Salem for the Salayans. This is my vow in this life." Chapter 302. 283. Euron Alliance. Solomon saluted at the entrance of the post road, and watched Aesop's carriage leave. He did not recognize that the driver in the cloak was Ammon, nor did he know that it was the only god he believed in. In fact, when Solomon saw Ammon, he felt that this person was very familiar, but he did not even think much about it, because Ammon came out of the Cloud Dream Shrine, and had just sacrificed to the goddess of the marsh with a group of drivers. The caravans passing through the charcoal marsh were particularly lucky these 2 days. The weather was neither cold nor hot, and it always made people feel very comfortable. Even the muddy pools in the swamp no longer emitted a rotten smell. The wild beasts that occasionally appeared in the jungle were now completely gone, and the annoying mosquitoes had also disappeared without a trace. 2 days later, Ammon drove out of the charcoal marsh, and came to the place where he captured King Lucier alive. This was the other end of the post road, and now it had developed into a large town. There was a newly built temple of great light in the town, which worshipped the holy fire of light that the people of Boz believed in, and another temple of the marsh goddess. After the fall of Enlil, the Enlil shrines in Hittite were still there. When Hittite was annexed by Boz, Cyrus and later Darius did not force the local people to demolish the Enlil shrines, but the officials of the various provinces built the Temple of the Holy Fire of Light, and the object of official sacrifice became the great god of light, Mazda. With the passage of time, Enlil was gradually forgotten, and the Hittite kingdom no longer existed. The new generation under the governance of several new provinces in Boz grew up, and the Enlil shrines in various places were gradually abandoned. Since the Enlil shrines had lost their official status, some people quietly dismantled the stones and took them back to repair their houses and courtyard walls. Today, there were not many Enlil shrines in the former Hittite, and Assur that were still intact, and had people regularly offering sacrifices to them. There were mainly 3 types of people who offered sacrifices to Enlil. One was the elderly who had devoutly believed in Enlil since childhood, and the other was the young who inherited this faith because of family reasons. As for the third group of people, they did not believe in Enlil or the Anunnaki gods at all, and were just expressing nostalgia or some kind of wish through this way. On the contrary, the The two temples of the goddess of the marsh, El Mar, still had an endless stream of people offering sacrifices to her. She had become a legendary local god. Ammon did not drive northwest of the former Hittite territory, but all the way south to the seaside. On the left was endless yellow sand, and on the right was a gradually lush grassland. This was the battlefield where he led the Nra legion to fight against the Hittite army of Nannar. Now the army was silent, and the yellow sand on the grassland was still the same. Ammon and Medanzo did not need to rest, but Aesop was just a mortal, and he was very old. So he needed to pay attention to his food and clothing along the way. Although Aesop claimed to be healthy, and did not need the special care of the gods, Ammon was like a mortal servant, arranging everything well along the way so that Aesop would not feel tired from the journey. Aesop left his mansion and his fields in the city of Salem to his friends, but he did not return to his hometown empty-handed. He brought his savings, which was a huge sum of money, and his decades of life had made Aesop very rich. As for the water and food needed along the way, they were all carried by Ammon in a spatial artifact, so there was no need for other supplies along the way. When the seemingly ordinary carriage came to the edge of the blue sea, it finally showed its extraordinariness. The two horses pulling the carriage subconsciously wanted to stop in front of the waves on the coast, but the coachman snapped his whip, and the horses seemed to be urged by some force and galloped forward again. Aesop lifted the curtain and looked out. The coachman was Ammonius, and no matter what kind of miracle appeared, he was mentally prepared, but at this moment he was still deeply shocked. The carriage galloped over the top of the turbulent waves, and the fresh sea breeze blew over with a slightly salty smell, but it gave people a very comfortable feeling. How many mortals in the world could have such an enjoyment in their lives? Aesop gazed at the sea for a long time, then withdrew his gaze and looked at Ammon's back, his eyes full of indescribable gratitude. There was an even more magical experience to come. After the carriage galloped over the sea, its speed was more than 10 times faster than on land, as if it was being carried by an invisible wind to fly. After an unknown amount of time, a few small dots appeared on the distant horizon, followed by another group of battleships in formation, and Medanzo could already vaguely hear the earth-shattering battle cries. With so many ships gathered together, a large naval battle of unprecedented scale was taking place ahead. Before those battleships could notice the carriage galloping over the sea, Ammon shook the reins, and the carriage had already soared into the sky. The horses pulling the carriage galloped, clouds forming under their hooves. Aesop's carriage passed over the battlefield, and what had broken out on the sea was a major naval battle that would decide the final outcome. Looking down from the clouds, the number of Pot's warships clearly exceeded the warships of the Hilton Coalition Army, but the Pot's navy came from various provinces of the Great Empire. The warriors' languages were mixed, and there were too many ships, so the command was not smooth. The warriors of the Hilton Coalition Army were mainly sailors who had been sailing for many years, and their command was unified and dispatched well, and they broke through the ranks of the Pot's warships. This naval battle was known as the Battle of Salami, and in the end, the Hilton Coalition Army won a great victory. The main force of the Pot's navy suffered heavy losses, and after that, they were no longer able to launch an attack from the sea. Not long after the outbreak of this naval battle, the Hilton Army, with the main force of the Spartan warriors, also fought fiercely with the Pot's army in Prada, and also won a great victory. The victory of these two battles marked the complete defeat of the invasion of the Pot's empire by the United Kingdom of Hilton, and the city-states were free from Pot's rule. When Aesop arrived at Yarn City, the people here were shouting and celebrating their victory. Aesop's carriage crossed the battlefield and landed directly on the outskirts of Yarn City. Medanzo even joked with Aesop, "You are really an auspicious sign. With your arrival, the Pot's army has finally retreated completely." Yarn was a beautiful city-state, and the patron goddess they believed in was Yelena, the goddess of wisdom in the Olympian pantheon. On a hill next to the residential area stood the magnificent Yelena Temple. The city-state still had the remains of the flames of war, and some of the white marble pillars of the buildings still had traces of gunpowder, but it was still very prosperous, lively, and full of vitality. Medanzo said curiously, "I thought I would see a city-state with broken walls everywhere, ravaged by the flames of war. I didn't expect to see such a scene. Aesop laughed and said, I heard that the Pot's army set fire to Yarn City. And now I know that the rumors are not necessarily true. All the people in Yarn City withdrew at that time. I guess they set fire to a batch of things that they could not take with them. But the damage here is not small either. Don't you see that the walls and many of the buildings are newly built? Madanzo nodded and said, Of course I noticed. The small city of Yarn has a lot of manpower, material and financial resources, and it was able to rebuild the main city to this state in such a short time. Amon, who had been silent all this time, explained. The city of Yarn also benefited a lot from this war. It was the organizer and leader of the coalition army, and its navy played the most important role. The nearby city-states also attached themselves to it, and Yarn made a lot of money from the war. More city-state alliances are being discussed in the council hall, and Yarn has become the leader of the alliance. When Aesop entered Yarn City to be interrogated, he calmly revealed his identity and did not hide anything. He directly introduced that he was born in the city of Maduri in the Union Kingdom of Hilton, and that his father was a merchant. When he was very young, he followed a merchant ship out to sea and encountered pirates, and was kidnapped by the pirates and sold as a slave, moving to many places on the continent. Later, he gained his freedom and became the governor of Salem in the plains of Duk, and now that he was old, he finally returned to his roots and took out the documents that could prove his identity. The listeners were surprised, and some had also vaguely heard of the legend of Salem and the name Aesop, which was news brought back by sages who traveled far away, but they did not expect to see the legendary person in person today. Aesop's arrival even caused a small uproar, and the sergeants guarding the city carefully examined his identity documents and the items he carried with him, but did not find anything wrong with them. When Aesop's carriage entered the city, the people around him cast surprised, envious, and suspicious gazes at him, and there was a lot of discussion in private, saying all kinds of things. With Aesop's age and experience, he no longer cared about these discussions, and calmly faced all kinds of gazes as he chatted with Madanzo about the past and present of Yarn City. Why did Madanzo say that this was a small city? This city was certainly not small in the United Kingdom of Helen, but compared to the famous cities on the continent he had seen before, it was indeed not grand or prosperous enough. Madanzo grew up in Babylon City, and later went to Montefiore. In terms of the size of a city, Yarn City was not even 1/10 the size of Babylon City, and it was far less magnificent than Montefiore City. The history of the countries on the continent was more than 1,000 years old, and their civilization was long, while the United Kingdom of Helen, like the Olympian gods, was only a rising star on the edge of the continent. But this city was full of vitality, and it had absorbed the seeds and nutrients of the civilizations of the countries on the continent, and developed very quickly. The people here were more free in thinking, and many great scholars and sages were born, and Aristotle, whom Amon had met before, was one of them. But many ordinary people in this city had a complicated mentality towards the countries on the continent. They used to be weak and learned, and when facing the powerful and rich Igut, Babylon, Hittite and other countries, they had a subconscious worship and even inferiority complex. When they gradually became powerful and rich, they gradually became arrogant and conceited, and the subconscious sense of historical inferiority transformed into an inexplicable sense of superiority and hostility towards foreign civilizations. This complex gradually began to show after the people of Helen defeated the Pot's army, so when people saw Aesop return, there would be all kinds of discussions with indescribable complex emotions. This was also the source of a civilization, and it might subtly influence many people over a long period of thousands of years, and Amon happened to arrive when the civilization of Yarn City had just risen. When Amon arrived, it was the Helen United Kingdom, which had just defeated the powerful Pot's empire. It was an era where all kinds of ideas were rampant, and all kinds of ideas were colliding with each other from time to time, bursting out dazzling sparks from time to time. This was also a new country different from the countries on the continent. As soon as Amon entered Yarn City, he squinted his eyes and listened to all kinds of sounds coming from the city. Not only the people around him were pointing fingers and discussing Aesop, but also the important matters that were being discussed in the city's conference hall. During the Hippocratic War, the nearby city-states had attached themselves to Yaran and formed the Yaran Alliance. This alliance originally had 35 city-states, and according to the agreement, they would jointly organize the Hellen United Navy, pay the alliance money, and build warships for the city of Yaran. But after the victory of the war, more than 200 city-states of various sizes had newly joined this alliance, and the alliance money paid by them became a kind of political tribute, which had the nature of an alliance tax, or more directly, a protection fee. The alliance money paid by the city-states was an unprecedented huge amount of money for Yaran City, and it was originally used by the Allied forces to fight against the Potts Empire. After the victory of the war, the alliance money paid by the city-states didn't decrease, but instead increased, and was used by the city of Yaran City to strengthen its own political and military forces, and to build a more magnificent Yaran City. Yaran City wasn't a kingdom, but a city-state republic. The adult men of the city-state with citizen status established the Citizens' Assembly, which was a consultative body to discuss all kinds of affairs, quarrel, gossip, and spread all kinds of rumors. In addition to the Citizens' Assembly, there was also a Nobles' Assembly, which only the honorable nobles were eligible to participate in, and it was an important political body. On the basis of the Citizens' Assembly, the city of Yaran City also organized a council of 500 people, which was the daily political body. This was the first time that Amon came to such a city-state republic. When he entered the city, it was the day when the council of 500 people of Yaran City was held. The main topic of discussion in the council hall was the matter of the nearby city-states joining the Yaran Alliance. The council of 500 people passed a resolution with an absolute majority, and decided to increase the alliance money of the affiliated city-states, open trade between the city-states, establish a unified alliance army under the command of the Yaran people, and punish and suppress the city-states that joined the alliance but didn't pay the alliance money or wanted to withdraw from the alliance. The more Amon listened, the more interesting he felt. This system implemented by the Yaran people should be more popular and supported by the people than the monarchy of the mainland countries, but the mentality of the people here was very worth pondering. At this time he also heard the conversation between Madanzo and Aesop, so he explained the recent war wealth of the city of Yaran City. The discussion in the council hall continued. The first topic was about income, and the second topic was about debt. During the Hippocratic War, Yaran had spent a lot of money on building a navy, and the recent reconstruction of the city was also a huge expenditure, so it was necessary to increase the alliance money of the city-states. Now that there was a huge income, it was reasonable to say that the debt of Yaran City should be repaid first. This debt was mainly borrowed from the states outside the Yaran Alliance during the war. However, the city of Yaran City did not want to pay it back, because their newly received alliance money needed to build a stronger army, more merchant ships, stronger fortifications, and more magnificent temples. So they thought of a way, which was to let the Citizens' Assembly vote on whether to repay the debt. If the Citizens' Assembly decided not to pay, then the city of Yaran City would not pay it back. In layman's terms, it was a vote to repudiate the debt. The reason why the city of Yaran City did not want to repay the debt was also very clear. They borrowed the money for the war, and now they needed more funds to strengthen their strength. The philosophy and behavior of the Yaran people was a kind of protection and care for the surrounding states. This proposal was passed by the Council of 500 people, and it was waiting to be submitted to the Citizens' Assembly for a vote. The third topic of this meeting was still related to finance. Some people believed that there were many wealthy merchants in the city of Yaran City who used various means to evade taxes, and that they needed to be strictly investigated. However, this proposal had already been rejected by the Council of Nobles, and this time it was rejected by the Council of 500 people, so it would not be submitted to the Citizens' Assembly for a vote. The last topic of this meeting was about military arrangements. The Hippocratic War was obviously over, so why did the city of Yaran City still want to increase its expenditure? In addition to the construction of merchant ships and temples, the rest of the main expenditure was for the military, because at present there was a good excuse, and that was the struggle between Yaran and Gabados. The city of Yarn City had established the Yarn Alliance, and Gabados, who had a very powerful military force, had also taken the opportunity to conquer many small states in the surrounding area, and established the Gabados Alliance to confront the Yarn Alliance in all aspects. The city of Yarn City hoped that all the city-states under the Gabados Alliance would attach themselves to it, so as to form a stronger Yarn Alliance. Amon had been listening to the discussion in the council hall, and relayed these topics and the results of the discussion to Aesop. Finally, he said, "These people are really complicated. They vote and negotiate within the city, and although the decision made in this way is inefficient, it is easier to get support than the order of the emperor. However, they are discussing how to blackmail other city-states so that the Yarn people can get more wealth, and at the same time, they decide not to pay their debts in this way, and refuse to order a strict investigation of the Yarn merchants who evade taxes in the city-states. You are a citizen of the Kingdom of Heaton. What do you think about this?" Aesop smiled bitterly and said, "When I was young, Yarn was a city-state republic like this today. In terms of military strength, it was inferior to Gabados, and in terms of wealth, it seemed to be inferior to my hometown Maduri, but it became strong in this war, and became the leader of the Yarn Alliance. I don't know if you heard it, but a passerby who just passed by accidentally said, 'Yarn is the republic of the Yarn people, the empire of the Heaton people.'" Amon just smiled and said nothing more. He then asked Aesop, "You are the guide, where should I drive this carriage?" Aesop replied, "Go forward, I will show the way, and we will find an inn to stay for a while." You're tuning in to the Lime's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.